Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Today is Monday, September 11th, 2023. We are here in the Larimer County Commissioners hearing room on the first floor of the Larimer County Administrative Services Building for our land use hearing. And I call this meeting to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for joining me for the Pledge of Allegiance today. I am Larimer County Commissioner Jody Shad McNally, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. Again, welcome and thank you for being here today. I'm joined at the dais by my colleagues, Larimer County Commissioner Kristen Stevens and Larimer County Commissioner John Kafalis. Also joining me today at the back behind us is our clerk to the board, Tessa Badig. Thank you, Tessa, for being here today. And we're also joined at the dais with our other staff who are supporting this meeting. We have Christina Luckison. Okay, great. Our assistant county attorney. We also have David Pringle from engineering, and we have Mark Christensen from planning. Welcome. And we also have Jenny Axmaker from planning manager, and our Director of Community Development, Rebecca Everett. Thank you all for being here today and supporting this hearing. So at this time, I will ask Rebecca Everett to kind of talk about our procedures today, and then I will talk about our discussion items. We have one special item I want to talk about before we proceed to the first item. So Rebecca, would you like to talk about the hearing and how folks can engage in this hearing today?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners and everyone who has attended or is watching on Zoom. We respectfully request that all members of the audience please silence any electronic devices. Please help yourself to a copy of the agenda, which is posted to my right on the wall here. And the agenda is also posted online at larimer.org/BOCC. Please wait to speak until you are recognized by the chair at the appropriate time, and we request that everyone maintain civility, refraining from any audience applause, comments, or disruptions, whether positive or negative, during the discussion of the items. If you are next to speak, please quietly make your way to the front of the room to conserve time. Please make all comments to the Board of County Commissioners from the podium, and a portable microphone is available as needed, as well as assisted listening devices. Please state your name at the beginning of any comments and provide the spelling of your name if it's unique. And please speak directly into the microphone so that those in the room are able to hear, as well as those who are online on Zoom. That concludes the overview of the procedures for this afternoon.
Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate that help. So we have, we do not have any consent agendas today. We have had listed four public hearing discussion items. At this time, I would like to call up item number 4, because we will, we're going to I will be asking for a motion to move forward, to table this and move it forward to the next hearing. So I'd like to ask for anyone in the room who was here for item number 4, the Alvarado Short-Term Rental Administrative Special Review, file number 23-CONE3505. If you were here for that hearing or that land use item, please raise your hand. Come on up to the podium and just wanted to have your name real quick, because we are going to probably move this item forward into 2 weeks because of Rebecca, if you wanted to say we have why we're moving that forward.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Shattuck McNally. We discovered after the packet was posted for this item that the sign that was supposed to be posted on the property notifying neighbors of the development application wasn't posted in time for a full 14-day notice period. So we are recommending that this item be continued to the September 25th hearing, same time, same place, in order to ensure there's a full public notice period.
So I want to thank you for being here. I didn't want you to sit all the way through the hearing and then find out. Yeah,
drove an hour. But
yeah, I did not want you sitting here for the whole hearing. So I hope that you will please reach out to staff and come back in the 2 weeks if you're still interested in making public comment for that item. Thank you for being here today, and I apologize that you're here, but hopefully you didn't have to wait. So we appreciate you being here and engagement in the process. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. It might have been nice if you posted it somewhere earlier today, because I would have seen it and I wouldn't have driven all the way here. But,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so with that, do we need to go ahead and would like to make a motion or ask for a motion from, would Commissioner Stevens mind making a motion to please table and move item number 4 to a land use hearing 2 weeks from today, which would be, let me just find that date for you, Commissioner.
25th.
The 25th.
Yes, Madam Chair, I move to postpone the Alvarado short-term rental administrative special review, file number 23, zoned 3505, to September 25th.
Thank you for that motion. September 25th of 2023, Commissioner Gonzalez. Anybody else have any other further comments? Okay, there's a motion on the table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that item is moved or tabled and moved to the hearing on the 25th of 2023. And now we move on to our first public hearing item, which is the Clark Short-Term Rental Administrative Special Review, file number 23-CONE 3483. And I believe Mr. Kitchenson from Planning will be presenting that item. So please proceed, sir.
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Mark Christensen, and I am with the Planning Department here at Larimer County. The item before you is a short-term rental application for an address at 91 James Peak Court, located at Livermore, located adjacent to Livermore, just southwest of there. The subject property is located southwest of Red Feather Lakes Road in the Glacier View Meadows subdivision. Again, it is the Clark short-term rental application with a case number of 23-zone-3483. The request is for the applicant for an administrative special review approval for a small short-term rental located in the existing 3-bedroom single-family residence for a maximum occupancy of 6 total guests with 2 per bedroom. The property owner is Stephen Clark, and the applicant is Juliana Neves. The current zone district is the RR2 residential with a lot size of 2.91 acres. As for utilities and access, there's on-site well, on-site septic. The Poudre Fire Authority is the fire district that services this area, and then the access is off James Peak Court. Again, the request is for a short-term rental defined as a dwelling rented to transient guests for a short-term lodging when not occupied by the owner or renter. STR is classified as commercial lodging facilities used and is permitted in the RR2 residential zone district following administrative special review. As part of this process, 101 postcards were mailed to neighbors within the Glacier View Meadows subdivision. These were mailed to those within 500 feet of the application. We received written comments from 5 community members in opposition of the proposed STR. In addition, we received 2 community members in support of the proposed STR. All community member comments that were received are included in the packet with attachment E. Here you will see the following review criteria for the approval of the short-term rental request. In addition to these specific criteria, the commissioners are also to consider the following criteria for short-term rentals due to their use-specific standards. Based on the staff review, the administrative review special process authorizes the director to approve applications if they believe the criteria are met, or refer these criteria to the commissioners if it is unusually complex or raises potentially unique or serious impacts to the county or the surrounding areas. Based on the staff review of the application, the staff believes that the short-term rental meets 3 of the 5 criteria in 6.4.3D. Staff does not have conclusive determination on criteria 1 or 2 of 6.4.3D. In addition, due to the fact that staff does not have conclusive determination on criteria 1 or 2, the development services team is not making a specific recommendation on the Clark short-term rental, and all the information by which the county commissioners may base their determination on are included in the packet. We have 2 suggested motions. If the Board of County Commissioners seeks to deny the application, and then the following motion for if the commissioners look to approve the application. And I am available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen, for your presentation. I appreciate that. Colleagues, do you have any questions at this time for the staff? Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mark, and thanks to all of you who are here. Welcome. One question I have is regarding the matter of the location of the property manager. It seems like they're the owners, and I think maybe living in Aurora perhaps, but then there's someone out of Loveland who would be the main person who would respond to complaints, and that seems to be right on the cusp of the threshold. So my question is, which is that the property manager needs to be 1 hour away or less, and I guess depending on the time of day, Google suggests it could be a little bit over an hour. So my question is, have there been further discussions on what's the most effective way to address that? And that might be a question for the applicant at some point. Do you have any insights there, Mark?
Yes, Chair, through you to Commissioner Cavalis. There has not been any additional conversations on this, but we will let the applicant speak to that as well.
Very well. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Any further questions, Commissioner Stevens? Okay, so we will move on now. I don't have any questions at this time. I will have some later, I think. And so I will I'll now give the applicant 10 minutes to present at the dais, and then we'll open it for public comment, and then you'll get 5 minutes for rebuttal. And so please proceed, identify yourself, and start with your presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Juliana Nieves. I am Stephen Clark's daughter, so the daughter of the owner of the house. He lives in Tennessee, so I am taking care of the house since his health is not so great right now. He can't be here. Which is the reason why we're looking to do a short-term rental, is to keep it in the family for me and my family. But we're not there very often, so in order to subsidize the cost, that's why we are doing a short-term rental. So I'd like to address the concerns of my neighbors, if I may. There seemed to be a lot of concern about the dangers of renting out your house, and I understand because it's my property. I care just about as much for it as all of you do as well. In the mountain, we've been evacuated twice during wildfires, so we've been there for 14 years and we know the dangers of that. So I'd just like to assure you that the property is a family-owned home, and we care very much about the community and welfare of the mountain, our property, and theirs. We plan to maintain and care for our property long into the future and have the utmost respect for nature and its preservation. We have a 2-night minimum, and absolutely no parties will be allowed. Like you said, there's only 6 people allowed at a time, so we're hoping to keep that to a minimum. We've installed cameras so that we can watch the property and hear what's going on. We also have hired a property management company to manage all of the reservations, the confirmation of guests, the calendar, screenings, and all of the information they need to receive to understand about their stay. My property manager, other than myself, is located in Loveland, Colorado. All the maps that I've done to her house are less than an hour. She's been there, stayed there. I've known her for 30 years. I trust her implicitly. I am 2 hours away in Aurora, and I will be here in a heartbeat if I have to be. I have spoken to neighbors about them keeping an eye on the house as well, and they'll give me a call if there's a party. We will escort them off the property. As far as fire danger goes, we mitigated all the surrounding trees, bushes, whatever, to make sure it's safe. Noise is a concern as well. I don't want noise up there. I like peace and quiet as well. And so we are looking into installing a decibel monitor so that we can know if there's anything going on. Water usage, we have a private well, and I've put up signs explaining that it's well water and to please be respectful of that and use it minimally, as well as the sewer. I don't expect there to be any increased traffic. We have a huge driveway, so all the vehicles will fit there, more than to accommodate 6 guests. I'm a pet sitter, so animals are very important to me. Wildlife is very important to me. I put signs up to protect the property and animals for that. It's also in my operations manual. We have put trespassing stakes, orange stakes around our entire property every 50 feet or so that they can clearly see where the lines are and to stay within those. And we have put exterior lighting just to minimally light up the stairs and the patio and other things like that. I hope that I've addressed all of your concern. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, this is your time for presenting about your application, and so you haven't used. I think you have a couple minutes, so we will let you finish, and then we will see if we have questions. If not, we will maybe ask. But do you have anything else you'd like to add for your presentation? I think they have about a minute and a half left, or maybe a little less.
I think I've covered all of the. Just wanted to reiterate. I have made sure that I am within guidelines of Larimer County and Glacier View Meadows as far as fire, quiet hours, and all of those things to make sure that people are respectful to the neighbors in the mountain and our property.
Okay, thank you. So, colleagues, so your time for your presentation is finished. Colleagues, do you have any questions at this time for the applicant, Commissioner Gonzalez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And would you mind repeating your name? I have a bit of a hearing loss and I didn't get it.
Juliana Nieves.
Oh, you're Juliana Nieves.
I am.
Okay.
Formerly Clark.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Thank you. First of all, a comment, and that is regarding the wildfire mitigation. It seems like you all worked very well with our wildfire partnership program manager, Raina,
Absolutely.
and you've addressed some of the concerns around defensible space and the home ignition zone. So thank you for that. I think
Yes.
that's critically important, especially in a place like Glacier View Meadows. My question is this, Juliana, and that is, given that the location of the property manager who would potentially respond to complaints is in Loveland, which is under an hour, over an hour, somewhere right around there. One of our referring agencies, Department of Health and Environment, suggested, and my question is, would you be open to that? I don't know what the cost is. Installing sound sensors if
Yes.
if there are concerns with perhaps exceeding the decibel levels at night and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's called a decibel monitor, and I have been looking into that.
So you would be open to
Seriously.
that?
Yes, absolutely.
And if we were to add that as a condition of approval, you'd be okay with that?
Sure, yes.
Okay, that is my question. Thank you.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I have a question. One of the, and I know you did answer some of the concerns from the neighbors, but one of the concerns that I saw that maybe wasn't answered as well is road maintenance. And can you talk about that a little bit? Like about the roads to get in there and what kind of road maintenance and who provides the dollars for those?
Glacier View Meadows does all the road maintenance, and they do a wonderful job up there. I've been up there in December and didn't not a drop of snow on the ground. They do a wonderful job.
Do you pay into that as a community
Yes,
member there?
there's an
Okay, thank
HOA
you.
that covers that.
Thank you. I think that's my only question for now. Thank you.
Sure, and then I have a question. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Juliana. And I think I read somewhere in the packet in relation to the potential impacts on the road, there was some discussion about ATVs, and I believe you stated that either in the operations manual or somewhere, you would make sure that it's clear that ATVs are not allowed to be driven on
Glacier
those
View
roads.
Meadows does not allow ATV
Oh, they do.
usage
Okay.
for guests of our property, only owners. So there will be notification that they are not allowed to use ATVs or fishing in our ponds.
Well, that's too bad.
They'll have to go to Red Feather.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe I'm done for now.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. So I want to go back to the property manager because I live, around the Loveland area, and I have friends and relatives up in the Red Feather Glacier View area, and I know how long it takes me to get up there, and it is over in an hour. So I'm just curious, when you say under an hour, does she live on where, because that's really important for us, for me, if to have someone to be able to respond. We have all these other folks that this is a clear condition to have someone who can respond in an hour or less. It's not,
Absolutely.
And so I have, especially in the winter or busy times, it can be over an hour. If not, I have never been up there in under an hour. So I'm just curious about that property manager being that far
She lives pretty
away.
close to the foothills and right off of, I don't know the name of that major street the first one you turn when you're coming down the mountain. I'm not sure the name of it. Sorry, I live in Denver. But she lives pretty close, and all the Google Maps that I did is all the different times a day. It was 59 minutes. One of them was an hour. So I feel safe and her husband is a mover that comes to Glacier View all the time, like once a week or so. So he's really familiar with the route as well, and he's on board to be her backup. So I feel very comfortable and she's a stay-at-home mom. She doesn't have a job. She's able to be, at my beck and call, and she's been my friend for 35 years.
And so they're going to be available 24/7 for any complaints
Yes.
and an hour's notice. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, well, I also have a neighbor that I've spoken with that's literally around the corner that's going to call me if there's anything she sees going on, so I can respond, have my friend or another person.
So my question is, we have this that property managers are supposed to be listed as kind of the person who is a professional property manager, who will be the person that the neighbors or anyone with an issue will be able to call that property manager and be able to respond. And so if they don't know whether to call your neighbor or to call you or call the property manager, that has a big concern to me because you don't know who's to call, and maybe they're not answering because maybe they're on vacation. Then the person who's making the call or have the concern may not know to call a different number.
Well, I
And
want to
so-
be first called so that I can manage it first. And if I need to call Jen or my cleaning person who lives a mile away, if it's an emergency, I'll call the police or something of that sort. But I am just as concerned as you. Sometimes it keeps me up at night. But I want to make sure that this cabin is covered and taken care of at all times. So I want to be the first to be receiving the call, and then I will direct which way it needs to go, whether I run up there, Jen runs up there, I call the police.
So it would be the sheriff's department at that time, and the
Sheriff's
sheriff's department is, already doesn't have a lot of folks that cover the rural areas because they're, they only have so many folks that are on time. So you can always expect, unless it's a life-threatening emergency, they're going to be able to
Right.
respond that quickly. So I want to make sure that's an expectation.
I
That
don't
is level
plan
set.
on relying on the sheriff's department for all of these things. I plan on taking care of everything myself. If it comes to that point where I absolutely need to call the sheriff's department, I will, but I do not foresee that being my first call.
Okay. I think that's all I have right now at this point. I think we'll go ahead and let public comment, and then we'll get 5 minutes for rebuttal if there's anyone for public comment.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, I will first ask anyone in the room, is anyone here to make public comment on this short-term rental application and view? If you'll come up to the podium and state your name and where you're from, you'll have 3 minutes for public comment. Thank you for being here.
Yes, my name is Kendall Frazier. I live at 195 Guardian Peak Drive in Glacier View Meadows. Also speaking on behalf of Mark and Barb Rednick, who are at 127 Colbert Court. I speak against this proposal. Glacier View Meadows is a residential area, not a vacation rental property. It is funded with dues dollars from the HOA members, not taxpayer dollars. It is not like Vail or Steamboat Springs. All the services and infrastructure is funded with dues dollars. What you're asking the homeowners to do is to use dues dollars to support a revenue generating business that is going to bring additional traffic into the community. Now, I will admit that there are revenue generating businesses in Glacier View Meadows, but this is different. This is bringing additional traffic. And I've heard that you will not allow dirt bikes, ATVs, but who enforces that? Because we already have a problem with our infrastructure and our roads in the community, and we have a lot of dirt bikes and ATVs that are using those roads. So we have a limited ability to enforce our covenants. We're not a wealthy community at all, and to maintain our roads, and therefore I speak against this. And one question I have, and maybe I'll hear this in rebuttal, where will the property manager's address be and phone number be posted so the community members around this property can get in contact with them? Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. And we will let the time for rebuttal and answer that maybe later. So I will ask now, is anyone else in the room like to make public comment on this application? Just anyone can just raise your hand. You're welcome to come up. Okay, Rebecca, I'll go to anyone online who would be interested in making public comment regarding this land use application.
Thank you. Yes, if anyone who is watching this hearing on Zoom wishes to make a public comment on this application, the Clark short-term rental, please use the raise hand button on your Zoom control bar to indicate that you'd like to speak. We'll give it a moment. We do not have any hands raised.
Okay, thank you. I will take one more opportunity for anybody in the room. Okay, so with that, we will close public comment. So we will give the applicant a 5-minute opportunity to address any concerns from public comment. Please approach the podium if you'd like to. You don't have to, but if you'd like to have a chance for rebuttal against public comment, you have 5 minutes.
I would like to address the name and number where it's posted. It's posted right outside the front door, right on the side of the cabin. My name, phone number, address is all listed right there, and so is Jennifer's. So you can reach either one of us if you have any problems, issues, anything of that, emergencies. Please feel free to call us there. As far as traffic increase goes, we're hardly ever there. We're there maybe 6 weekends a year. So the fact that we're never there, we've decreased your traffic, and somebody could live there year-round. The person who lived there before lived there year-round, and that it's not going to increase traffic any more than that would. ATVs will be monitored via Vicasa. They are the property management company that I have hired to make sure my property is safe, and I will be monitoring it myself with a camera, which I will demonstrate for you, but I didn't bring it. So that's all I have to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that rebuttal. So we'll close that period of the hearing as well. And so now I will ask my colleagues, do they have any further questions for from the public comment, or for the applicant, or for staff? Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, I have one question for the applicant. Again, sorry to make you come back up. But there was one comment that was a written comment that said that based on past experience, there was like some noise or a party house. Was that, do you know anything about that, or?
No,
What's
we've
your-
owned it for 14 years. We've never had a party or noise complaint.
Okay. It didn't really give any further information on that, so I just wondered. Thanks for addressing that. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gonzalez, do you have any questions or comments?
I have two questions for staff.
Okay.
So my first question is, do we know in the Glacier View Meadows subdivision, what is the density, short-term rentals versus overall homes?
Commissioner Gonzalez, I could pull up our short-term rental map on the screen and just share that for you all to see what
That would be helpful.
what short-term rentals have already been approved in that area.
May I ask my second question while you're doing that? And my second question is regarding the issue of the property manager being located under an hour away. Based on the previous short-term rental regulations, which is what we're operating under, is that a requirement or guidance or a guideline?
Jenny's going to look that up to get you a definitive answer there. In the meantime, I can answer your first question here.
Lovely.
So let me zoom out for some context here. So up on this corner of the screen, to the left is Red Feather. Down here is Glacier View. So I'm going to zoom into the Glacier View area. What's called out at this point with the blue box around it is 91 James Peak Court, where this short-term rental is proposed. And then the boxes that you see in orange signal other short-term rentals that are have been fully approved by Larimer County in this area. So you can see the dot here, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other short-term rentals that have been previously approved in the Glacier View area.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's very helpful. Good visual. 6 short-term rentals that have been officially approved out of how many homes up in that neighborhood? About?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how many homes we have in Glacier View.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Stevens, do you have any other questions?
Do you have an answer to the other question?
I sure do. So I'm pulling up the code. This just shows you the red line code, which is the old text. This is the text that would be applicable to this short-term rental, and it does in fact say that the short-term rental shall have a property manager consisting of the owner or a responsible party representing the owner to manage the use. At any time it is occupied, the property manager shall be located within 1 hour or less travel distance from the short-term rental, and their contact information be posted. So yes, that is still a requirement under the prior code and under the current code. And I would assume, based on the code enforcement strike policy, that if they didn't respond in an appropriate amount of time, that could be a chance to get a strike, leading to the revocation of the license.
Thank you.
Just curious, I'll piggyback on Commissioner Gonzalez's question about property managers being within an hour. It says Mr. Christensen. Is that something, I mean, I live in that area, so I know how long it takes for me to get up there. So I'm just curious, did you do multiple mappings and things like that? Because weekend time versus, I mean, it's going to vary, but I have not seen it ever be under an hour. So I'm just curious.
So staff can't account for traffic. That's not something that we can necessarily guarantee. I can tell you Director Everett just did a Google Maps travel route, and it was 1 hour and 2 minutes.
And I just did it, and it was about an hour and 9 minutes. So, yeah, okay. All right. And when we talk about Glacier View, we have Glacier View 1 through 12. And so there's every little area has different neighborhoods. So this is in Glacier View number 1 or 2 or.
That's a good point. Is this one particular filing or the whole thing?
Yeah, because I'm wondering, because you saw Red Feather, but there's like 12 different gates. And so they're like, kind of, to me, they're like little neighborhood pods. And so I'm just curious.
It's gate 1.
This would be the first gate.
Madam Chair, yeah, but it is in the 10th filing of Glacier View.
Okay. Because, there's sometimes that makes a difference too. And so, Rebecca, I'm assuming that map is all of Glacier View and not just the one, gate 1.
Correct. The map I was sharing is the full Glacier View area, not one individual filing.
Okay, that's helpful. I appreciate that. That's very helpful. And I see that the notifications of the conditions of approval were only 500 feet. And I have a concern about that, especially if someone has to drive up a driveway. As she said, it was listed on her doorstep. And I know if someone has, it's 2.9 acres. If someone had an issue and I don't think I would feel comfortable traveling onto someone's property and looking for that name. And 500 feet would not, of the property line, but wonder if noise carriers, if there's 2 properties over, are we going to make this more than 500 feet, especially in the larger areas like that? I feel like that just really limits it to how many people are going to be notified with the appropriate name and number. And I know we have it on site for the website, but still there's a lot of folks who live in that neighborhood that may not know that we have this new website that has everyone listed in the numbers. And so I'm just curious how, I would like to think that in these larger acreage areas that we do something larger than a 500 foot. So that would be something I'd be concerned about.
So staff is certainly open to expanding that buffering. This is what we've been using as a standard going forward, but with additional advisement from the commission, we'd be happy to alter that.
I appreciate that. It's something I've kind of brought up for a long time. Just, it seems like 500 feet is just, to me, one property, hop frog over, it could be, someone else can be home, but someone else is hearing the noise and they haven't got the notice. So I'm just curious about that. Okay. Any other comments, colleagues? Commissioner Kafalis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to also point out, unless I'm misunderstanding, that the 10th condition of approval requires that the contact information for the property manager gets mailed out to folks within that, to neighbors within that 500 foot.
Yes, that's the requirement of the condition, but if you would like to alter that condition, we're happy to accommodate that.
Oh, I see. Well, at this point, I just wanted to point it out, and also the condition of approval includes that if the property manager changes, that has to be mailed out to update the neighbors. So.
Okay, colleagues, if you don't have any other further questions, are we ready to start deliberation? Commissioner Stevens, you okay? Commissioner Kafalis, would you like to go first?
Sure, I'll do my best. So first of all, appreciate the applicants being here in person to make their case. Certainly appreciate Mr. Barber also coming and offering expressing his concerns about this short-term rental or short-term rentals in general. And I think you also mentioned another neighbor that you were representing that person's point of view. So we have to base our decision on the 5 review criteria in the land use code 6.4.3D or something. And the only 2 in question were criteria 1 and 2, and it is my opinion that they have been, through the information provided at the hearing, they've been met regarding addressing the concerns around wildfire mitigation, also the issues related to, I think these folks live there, they pay into the HOA dues, and therefore the road maintenance, and that it would be clear regarding the use of dirt bikes or ATVs. So it is my opinion that those two criterion have been met by doing that, and also I would respectfully ask that we add another condition of approval, and that is that there be a sound sensor, that would be a condition of approval to install a sound sensor, especially as maybe one way of dealing with the uncertainty about the 1 hour distance or time frame for a property manager to get there. And so those are my comments, my deliberation. Therefore, I'm inclined to support this short-term rental application with the 10 conditions of approval that we've received, and maybe we'll need to explain about that, in addition to an 11th one, which would be around the sound sensor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are you finished for now with that?
Am I what?
Are you finished for now with your deliberation?
Believe so. I think I've said enough.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, I will also vote in support of this, and I appreciate the condition of approval and support the condition of approval that Commissioner Kafalis said. I do think sound sensors are important. I would also I think Commissioner Shattuck McNally was suggesting that the contact information be mailed to owners within in a bigger radius of the short-term rental, and I would certainly support that. I don't know if 1,000 feet is right or what the right number is, but and I'll let you suggest something, but I certainly would support, just so those folks know who they need to contact if there are issues. But other than that, I am in support of this application.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate you addressing that. I unfortunately will not be supporting this application. I will be voting, and I would incline not to support it. I not feel comfortable that condition 1 and 2 have been met. I don't feel comfortable having the property manager living right on the cusp. I will argue it would be more than an hour. I know it's kind of on that cusp, and I think that knowing that they need to respond within an hour and having a phone call and then having them call another person, that adds 5-10 minutes, and they will not be. I have really concerns about them responding within an hour. I do have concerns still about, even with noise centers and people, I hear stories all the time of folks, you rent out and someone does something and then you have to go back and address that. And I know they have a lot of criteria for addressing who rents these places. And I still think this is a really high-risk wildfire area. And so I think that between the noise and a lot of extra traffic, and I still have a lot of concerns about the location of the property manager. Since I am probably not in the minority here, I would ask that it's not just on the door. I think it's really uncomfortable for someone who's having a conflict with someone who's renting that house to have to go up to the door and ask for that number. And I think it'd be great to have a larger group, but I will not be able to support this application at this time. Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it changes your mind if we ask them to designate a property manager that lived closer. But
that would certainly be helpful, because I think that, when you say respond within an hour, if they're calling the owner in Aurora, and then she has to call and someone maybe they don't pick up right away, that's going to add time. And then we have frustrated residents who live in the neighborhood that are, expecting a response. And we also can't rely on our Larimer County Sheriff's Department to be responding to issues unless they're life-threatening or a life emergency. And so, that would certainly help with that. And I certainly would hope that they are maybe at least a quarter mile around the property, getting folks notified of who to call, and certainly want to make sure that they do know that there is a system, and we have a new system in place for having contacts and reaching out when there are issues. So that is something that is a concern for me. So But thank you for asking that question. But it sounds like she's really set on having her long friend of 35 years to do this. So, that's one of the reasons that I don't feel it's met 1 and 2 for my stake, along with the property manager. So.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can I just ask our lawyer, Christina? So if we wanted to extend the radius of the people that are notified with that property manager's name, is it best to go with feet or miles, or is there any kind of number that we would suggest, or that other staff would suggest?
I don't, this is Christine Luckison, Assistant County Attorney. I don't think it matters, feet or miles, whatever you're comfortable with, as long as it is clear.
And Commissioner Kafalis, I guess since you and I are the people that are voting in favor of this application, do you have
I
a
have
suggestion?
A question maybe to our community development folks. I mean, the way it's written in the land use code is in feet. So I don't know if that would cause any confusion if we considered increasing the radius in terms of notification or mailing notices to miles. I would be inclined to determine what is your recommendation on if we do it more than 500 feet. Are we talking about 750 feet in light of the 2 mile driveway or whatever it is? That can't be 2 mile driveway. Could you help us with that, Rebecca?
Yeah, maybe, and one clarification I might offer first is that the distance is measured from the property line, not from the house itself. So it's, 500 feet from the property line. Using feet would be more consistent with how we provide notice for other things in the code. So that would be preferred by staff for consistency's sake, but not for a particular kind of policy or legal reason.
I mean, the one thing I have is, picking like an arbitrary amount of feet is like, I don't know how close the next house is or property is. So I could say 1,000 feet and it wouldn't include any more people than, right? And so I don't know, I'm not really sure how to determine that. If sort of like a mile radius, I mean, would that add, I don't know, these houses are on pretty decent sized acreage, I feel like, for the most part, and so would that be, but I mean, a mile away, you're probably also not gonna,
Commissioner Kafalis?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'll offer the following suggestion. If we still want to go with adding additional, increasing the radius, perhaps the additional condition of, or the amendment to the number 10 condition of approval would be, the takeaway is that we want to increase that notification radius, but based on your recommendation after reviewing the maps and, what would be the most effective, is it 1,000 feet or 750 feet, if the intent is to reach more, more neighbors. Does that confuse things, Jenny and Rebecca?
So I would just add another option that we have apparently done in the past, and that's to require that you send notice to all the subdivisions or subdivision lots within that filing of Glacier Valley. So rather than get at a distance, you could get at it by a filing of a subdivision plat.
Yeah, I would support that. I think that makes a lot more sense. Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah, that does make more sense to me as
And
well.
may I ask one more clarifying?
Yes, please, Commissioner.
And I thought I heard discussion over there about, what was it? What was the additional thing that you were saying, Commissioner, about
About the property manager,
trying to get a property manager that's certainly within?
sir?
And so that is a suggestion. If we were to add that as a condition of approval, would that secure your support for this?
Certainly would move me much, much closer than I am now.
Well, but does that mean you would vote yes or no? I guess that would be because otherwise, if that's not going to make a difference in terms of how you vote, then it seems to me we keep it the way it is.
Well, I appreciate that question, Commissioners. I just feel like if it is a condition of, for them to have a property manager within an hour or less, and it is right on the cusp, and it depends on which day and how long, it could be weather, it could be traffic. I still feel like it should be someone who's going to respond within an hour or less, not that they get the call within an hour, they need to respond. And so I feel like that is not addressed. And I still have concerns about it being in a wildfire area, and we have a lot of neighbors in opposition. And I think, and we had 2 come down today that were actually representing 4, it sounds like. And so I just, I want to make sure those voices are heard. So I guess for me, that would be one of the 3 things between the fire risk and then also with we having so many neighbors in opposition. One of the 3 would be nice, but I don't know if it would sway me fully. And I still feel like it's a condition that we have, and I don't feel like it's been met. So. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be vague. I'm just being honest. I don't think it would move me completely because I had those 3 things that were concerning to me.
Were you going to comment, Commissioner?
Commissioner Stevens?
Seems like we should take that one off the table.
Yeah, we can take that off the table. And I will just remind folks that if there are violations and a person and the property manager showing up at over an hour later would be a violation. That's a question for staff and they're nodding their heads. So there is a like kind of a 3 strikes you're out type policy. So if there are 3 violations, documented violations, I mean, so it's in their best interest for their property manager to be up there in an hour. If that doesn't happen, I mean, that is a violation. So it's, it would be accounted for in that regard. So I think that, I just want, neighbors to know that that's part of our rules is that if there are violations and people, the license is revoked after 3 violations. So I think that Commissioner Kafalis, in asking your question, I'll leave that one alone, but recommend all the subdivision lots, is that how we were saying it, in the subdivision would be notified with the name of the property manager and their contact information. And then the sound sensor would be the second condition that we would apply. Does that sound correct?
I think that would be the 11th and 12th condition. That would be the 11th and 12th condition.
What's the 12th? I'm sorry.
The mailing for the whole subdivision and then the sound sensor.
I believe we would just be amending number 10. Number 10, we would.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. So the 11th and then amending number 10. So I sounds like you two have come to a consensus. And so, and I appreciate you offering to find some common ground for me to feel more comfortable. And I appreciate you asking that question, both of you. And I appreciate you understanding my concerns. So Commissioner Kafalis, since you started with the first amendment, would you like to make that motion?
Sure.
Thank you.
And before I do that, Mark, would you display the slide that shows the updated conditions of approval based on the addendum that we were provided earlier today? In the motion, please. Thank you. All right, I'll give it a go. I move that the Board of County Commissioners approve the Clark short-term rental file number 23-zone 3483, subject to the following conditions. Amending condition number 10 to read, to replace to surrounding property owners within a 500-foot radius of the short-term rental to read contact information to all of the residents of the 10th filing, Glacier View Meadows 10th filing. And adding condition number 11, which would require the installation of a sound sensor device. The attorneys are nodding their heads, so thank goodness for the attorneys. So that is my motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for making that motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those in opposition? Nay. That motion passes 2-1, and we'll move on to our next agenda item. Okay, so our next agenda item are item number 2, the Barefoot Real Estate Investment LLC Short-Term Rental Administrative Special Review, file number 23-ZONE3482. And Mr. Christensen, I believe you're also doing this presentation.
Yes, Madam Chair, through you again, this is Mark Christensen with the Planning Department here in Larimer County. So the item before you is the Barefoot Short-Term Rental. It is case number 23-ZONE3482. The subject property is located at 329 North Sunset Street, addressed in Fort Collins with zip code 80521. It is located north of LaPorte Avenue and south of Vine, off of Sunset Street in the Rostec Addition subdivision. The applicant requests an administrative special review approval for the small short-term rental to be located in a newly constructed 2-bedroom single-family residence with an additional sleeping area for a maximum occupancy of 6 total guests, 2 guests per room. The property owner is Daniel Crisafulli. Apologies if I mispronounced that. Current zone district is RR2 Rural Residential with a lot size of 0.9 acres. As for utilities, it is Sunset Water and Fort Collins Sanitation. The fire district is Poudre Fire Authority, and then access is off North Sunset. Again, short-term rental is defined as a dwelling rented to transient guests for a short-term lodging when not occupied by the owner and renter. The STR use is classified as commercial lodging facilities use and is permitted in the RR2 Rural Residential Zone following administrative special review. 124 postcards were mailed to neighbors within the Glacier, that is a typo, within the Rostec subdivision. We received 11 community members writing in opposition to the proposed STR. The community member comments are included in the packet. Again, for the commissioners to approve the application, it must find that it meets the following 5 criteria in general review criteria. And in addition, with the use-specific standards, it is required to meet these standards as well. With an administrative special review, the director has the ability to approve the applications by which all criteria are met and there are no substantive issues. If the director determines that the application is unusually complex or raises potentially unique or serious impacts to the county or the surrounding areas, the director may refer the application to the Board of County Commissioners for decision pursuant to the same criteria under which the director would have been required to apply for that application. The proposed administrative special review for the Barefoot STR meets criteria in section 3.3.5B2 and meets 3 of the 5 criteria in section 6.4.3D. Staff does not have a conclusive determination on criteria 1 and 2 of section 6.4.3D. Therefore, the Development Services team is not making a specific recommendation on the Barefoot for short-term rental. File number 23, ZONE 3482. And all presented information to the county commissioners may base their decision on has been brought before you. So again, we have the 2 suggested motions. We have the motion for denial and we have the motion for approval, and I am available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen, for your presentation. Well done. And I will now ask my colleagues if they have any questions at this time. Commissioner Kofalis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple of questions. So in one of the written comments that we received, I believe, there was a reference to, this area, which is a very unique area on the northwest part of Fort Collins, is located in the growth management area. And I think one of the email comments referenced some kind of guideline or regulation that says short-term rentals have to be 500 feet apart. I wonder if someone could clarify that because it has bearing on this particular request or application for 329 North Sunset. when I believe there's one at 323, currently existing STR at 323 North Sunset? That is my first question.
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Kofales. To my knowledge, and having formerly worked in the city of Fort Collins, the city of Fort Collins does not have any regulations related to the separation of short-term rentals, and in fact allows multiple short-term rentals within the same building if it's in the correct zone district. So I do not believe that there's a standard specific to the Fort Collins growth management area here that would be applied.
May I continue? Thank you, Madam Community Development Director. My second question is, one of the referring agencies of the city of Fort Collins, because this proposal application is within the growth management area, and they listed a number of things. And one of those things, if I remember correctly, was should this area be annexed into the city? And I imagine the neighbors might have something to say about that. But should it be annexed into the city, they were suggesting, excuse me, that regarding the city road standards, that consideration for right-of-way, expanding the right-of-way. Could you speak to that, Rebecca or Mark or someone? Does that make sense, colleagues? Oh, the engineering fellow might.
So Chair, through you to Commissioner Kofales, we did receive that comment as well. To my knowledge, dedication of right-of-way would come more with a platting action or some sort of subdivision process rather than a short-term rental application. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that is correct. Right-of-way would not be required to be dedicated unless there was a development application kind of with the city of Fort Collins that required that, or if there was an application while it's in the unincorporated county that, like Mr. Christensen referenced, would require platting or subdivision.
Thank you both. One last question at this time, Madam Chair. Similar to before, is there a way to pull up the map to show how many STRs are in this area? Short-term rentals?
I can pull up the same map that I did last time.
Yeah, and I Chair, through you, I already do have it pulled up, so let me just switch my screen share for you. Chair, through you to Commissioner Kofales. As you can see, the vicinity here, the proposed short-term rental is at 329, I believe, and it's located in this vicinity. There are 3 other short-term rentals between Vine and LaPorte, Taft Hill Road, and Overland Trail.
Thank you, Mark. It's very helpful to have this visual.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, with regard to that, were there more, did resident, and maybe residents will speak on this, but it sounded like people thought there were more there. Do we know if there's somebody that's operating out of compliance? Or do we have any code compliance issues on somebody operating out of compliance?
Yeah, it's possible that some of the confusion here is there are multiple applications for short-term rentals in review with the planning department in this area. So you have 2 before you this afternoon that are in this area. There is another application that's in review that is not ready for a decision yet. So that could be the source of some of the public comments that you're receiving relate to some applications that are before you this afternoon and others that haven't been heard by the board yet.
Thank you. And then with regard to the Commissioner Kofales' question around any potential annexation, if this property were annexed into City of Fort Collins, is there any idea of what the zoning would be in that area?
We could look that up. I don't think we've got that off the top of our heads, but
Because
we
I
can
know
look that
that
up quickly.
with regard to City of Fort Collins, that there are a lot of zoning areas that don't allow short-term rentals at all. So I think that in the City of Fort Collins's regulations, that short-term rentals are only allowed in zones that allow bed and breakfasts or other lodging type, so more commercial zones largely. So that's where my curiosity stems from.
If it would be helpful, Fort Collins does offer a map where short-term rentals are allowed versus not allowed, and I'd be happy to share that map to give you a better idea of what this area looks like.
I think that would be helpful.
All right. I'm getting closer here.
So this should show you the area. So Sunset is right here, and then basically a large swath of the eastern property is available for short-term rentals. The green, correct.
That's primary.
And that's a primary short-term rental, which is allowed to be, I believe, non-owner occupied, or no?
Sorry, let us clarify quickly. There's a distinction between, on this map, the yellow and the green. One is required to be owner occupied in the short-term rental. And that, so I think the green primary requires an owner to be living in the property if they are also renting it out. So it's primarily a single-family home, and when they go on vacation, they rent it out, or they rent a room out, or they live in another building on the property, for example. So primary means the owner is on site or lives on site. A non-primary short-term rental can be rented, the owner doesn't need to live on the property to rent it out. So for the majority of Fort Collins, City of Fort Collins, an owner is required to be on site to operate that short-term rental. And that's what the green on the map is showing. Sorry, that may be confusing. We can clarify if there are more questions.
Does
No, it's clear to me.
Okay. Commissioner Kafalis.
So, thank you. So does that mean, Rebecca and colleagues, that should this area be annexed into the city, then they would have to adapt to the requirements of the Fort Collins land use code as it relates to short-term rentals?
So it may depend on what the conditions are at the time of annexation. If this area is ever annexed, it depends on what zoning district is applied. So the zoning that's applied to these areas that are shown in green is the low-density mixed-use neighborhood zoning within Fort Collins. If this area, the Hollywood Sunset area, were to be annexed into the city, it may have that same zoning. It may have a lower density zoning, which could determine whether short-term rentals are permitted or not. But the bottom line is it would probably be treated as a legal non-conforming use, something that had approval, had prior approval. It's a little bit different with short-term rentals because there's a licensing component too. So if there would probably need to be a determination by the City of Fort Collins on whether they would honor that license as it was approved in the county and allow it to continue, or if they would take some different action. So it's pretty speculative, and this area is not eligible for annexation at the moment. Who knows when it might be eligible for annexation? So that's hard to know as well.
Proceed, Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and your comments are very helpful. Thank you. I believe one last question for now of staff, and that is the home in question is newly built, and I'm understanding that it is actually standing because I was a little bit confused about that. But it's a newly built home that is being considered for a short-term rental, and based on the information we received from our building department, there are a number of additional life safety requirements, such as the installation of a fire suppression sprinkler system, etc. My question is this: are those conditions of approval to make sure that complies with what the building department is recommending?
Chair, through you to Commissioner Kafalis, just one point of clarification. The building is not built just yet. I believe the building permit is still in. And I'll turn it over to Jenny for the second half of that.
Yeah, those, we don't need conditions for those because those will be enforced upon issuance of the building permit.
If I may, that raises another question, and thank you for clarifying. It was a little bit unclear. There's a lot that we have to read through, whether this structure was actually standing, but it sounds like it's in the process of securing the proper building permits, et cetera. Is it typical that we would be considering a short-term rental application for a structure that isn't currently built?
I wouldn't say it's typical or atypical. I mean, I think the majority of the applications you see in front of you are in structures that are already built, that someone has purchased. But it doesn't really make a difference from a code perspective on whether it's built yet or not. It would still be constructed under the building code under the same code that a single-family home would be subject to, with some additional, life safety, review by the building department. In most cases, the short-term rental applications you see in front of you need some kind of modification, additional building permits in some form or another to make sure there's proper egress, or other conditions on the site may not be compliant with current building codes. So if there's a new building permit in review for a new building, we have the chance to catch all of those requirements up front with that initial building permit. So I'd say from a planning perspective, it's kind of neutral, and building code will catch those things either way, whether it's an existing building or a new building.
Thank you.
So I have a quick question to build off what Commissioner Kafalis says, because that was one of my questions. I thought it was unusual to be approving a license for a home that's not even completed or has still building permits out. And so, I'm worried about folks speculating and trying to get licenses and being ready to open whenever it's new. I'm just curious about that. Is that something that we're seeing more of, or I just feel this is a concern. Is that I know that they have to meet all these criteria, but still, it just seems unusual, I guess, and it just gives me pause to think about. So, is this something we're seeing more of, or I don't think we've seen one of this way before. I don't believe, but
That's correct. This is the first one that we've seen as a unbuilt STR application, and I would just echo what Director Everett said, in that they're constructing it to meet the codes that retrofitting is sometimes challenging to do.
okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Any further questions, colleagues? Okay, so now we'll go ahead and move on to the presentation from the applicant. The applicant would have 10 minutes to present, and then we'll open for public comments. Please come to the podium, identify yourself, and you'll have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I change the slides here? Do I?
Just holler at me when you're ready to change.
Sweet, thank you. My name is Daniel Crisafulli, and this is my wife, Dee, and our two girls, Mills and Willow. And I want to thank you for taking time today to discuss our project. I also want to thank our neighbors who have jumped in to comment. It is clear that this is a controversial subject, and I do want to say to our neighbors, I hope that this can be a place where we hold space for one another, and whether we agree or disagree, we can continue to be neighbors who believe the best in one another, who look out for one another, and who continue to work together to bring our community closer together. Commissioners, some of our neighbors seem to be concerned with an investor running some sort of short-term rental in the neighborhood in which they are not connected. I want to be clear that we are very connected to this neighborhood. My wife and I purchased our property at 321 North Sunset Street. If you can go to the next slide too. Back in 2013, and on Christmas Eve 2015, We finished the demolition of a house that was not sitting on a permanent foundation and literally splitting in half. And we built the property that we call home today. Every year, you can go to the next slide, sorry, thanks. Every year, we invite over 400 of our neighbors to our house. And we host a neighborhood potluck where we have music and games and bounce houses for the kids and sometimes the adults. And then every 2 years, our apple trees explode with fruit, and we invite the neighbors back, and we all press cider together. And we even this year saw a dream come true when my sister and her family moved to Fort Collins and bought the house across the street from us. So we're very connected to this neighborhood, and we care deeply for it. The reason for our short-term rental application is very straightforward. It's simply that we would like to pass homes along to each of our children one day. We are concerned that in 20 years' time, when they are ready to purchase a home in Fort Collins, that they won't be able to afford it. If the trend continues, a modest size home in our neighborhood will cost nearly $2 million. And that's just in 20 years' time. Our reason for a short-term rental is simply to give our kids a home one day, and in the meantime, overcome the challenges that exist in owning property. The property we've purchased, sounds like it has been clarified, but there was a home here that was dilapidated that we did tear down. And our goal is to simply construct a home that we can hold and not lose money on for the next 20 years. The challenge of increased construction costs of nearly $400 a square foot today, combined with increased interest rates at almost 7.5% today, simply don't allow for us to build a traditional long-term rental and not lose thousands of dollars each month. So that leaves us with two options. We can hold a vacant property for the next 20 years, or we can build the property that we hope to provide to our kids one day. In my opinion, holding a vacant property does not benefit the community as much as building a property. In the northwest side of Fort Collins, we are in a bit of a lodging desert. There are not many lodging options for us to house our guests that come into town. And as our neighbor Mitch commented, that I'll read now, for the past few years, when they come to visit, my wife's parents have been residing just down the street from the home in Danny's rental property. Given that our residences are located a few miles northwest of downtown, the availability for rental spaces in the area are quite limited. Considering that my in-laws are in their 70s and 90s, it's crucial to have them in accommodations relatively close to us in case they require any support during their stay. The presence of additional short-term rental options, particularly outside of Old Town District, holds significant importance to us and several others in our situation on this side of town. Importantly, Danny's rental property provides the convenience and professional quality that we need without compromising the peaceful, tranquil atmosphere of the neighborhood. On the contrary, it enhances the experience for our visitors to Fort Collins, allowing them to fully embrace the calm and serenity of the area while remaining close to the attractions like Horsetooth, CSU, and downtown restaurants. In consideration of our neighbors, many of whom occupy residence only suitable for immediate family members, the availability of more short-term rental options proves exceptionally beneficial. There's many public benefits that we see that come from owning a short-term rental. If you can go to the next, you can actually go to the next slide after that one. We see a number of them. Holding vacant land doesn't allow for any of these benefits. But some of the things that we love, I've already mentioned. We bring visitors to the area of town that we love. But building a short-term rental, it creates opportunities for our neighbors. Our builder lives 1 block away on Hollywood Street. One of our carpenters on Webb Street, 1 block away. Our designer on Sunset Street. Our electrician on Impala Street, 3 blocks away. Our roofer on Hollywood Street, 1 block away. And then once the home is built, we're hiring cleaners, landscapers, handymen, everyone it takes to maintain a home. It seems as though the comments from our neighbors fall into three main categories. One, that we're investors not invested in the neighborhood. I hope that we've covered that. Two, concerns that a short-term rental is not of benefit to the neighborhood. We obviously believe that it is. And three, concerns about traffic, noise, and the impact to the neighborhood. I'm going to leave us with comments from three other neighbors concerning this specifically. And if you can pull up that map with the stars, the reason I wanted to point out these neighbors is you can see that black dot is our current short-term rental that we own. And the red dots are our neighbors that have commented, that are most impacted by that short-term rental. This is from Bob Zulig. My name is Bob Zulig, and I live at North Sunset Street, near the property under review. The owners are not outside investors, but actually live in the neighborhood on North Sunset Street, who I've known for several years. They are truly community-centered and invested in the neighborhood, often encouraging, organizing, and participating in neighborhood and other friendly gatherings. Their presence in the neighborhood has fostered a sense of community that I've never experienced in any of the places I've lived. Noise is often a concern with short-term rentals, although this hasn't been my experience. I've owned property across the street from their existing short-term rental that's been in operation since March of 2020, and we've never had any noise or any other issues of that matter, with the short-term rental being so close to our property. I see no issue with the proposed use change at 329 North Sunset Street. And from Thomas Haynes, my wife and I have been neighbors of the Cristofolis for the past 8 years. We refer to Dee as the mother goose of the neighborhood, who everyone knows and loves. Danny and Dee host their annual or their yearly neighborhood potluck that has enriched and grown our community ties to one another. A few years ago, Danny and Dee built a house catty corner to us to be run as a short-term rental, and in the couple of years that it's been in operation, short-term rental, we've had zero complaints of noise, increased traffic, or other conceivable disruption. On the contrary, we see it as a benefit of this other modestly sized short-term rentals in the neighborhood to provide accommodation for guests and visitors in the neighborhood comprised mostly of smaller homes that we cannot comfortably accommodate our visiting guests. My wife and I are in favor of the project across the street and support the Cristofolis in their endeavor. And from Laura Hoover, my family and I have lived at 328 North Sunset Street, across the street from Danny and Dee's current short-term rental, and also across the street from the proposed short-term rental. We've not had any issues whatsoever with their current Airbnb, and they take great care of the property. Honestly, it's really nice to have something in the neighborhood available to our guests, as most other lodging options are far away. Our whole community uses it as their personal guest house, since most of us have modest homes. Cristofolis are anchors in the community and our street, and their care and generosity for those around them is guaranteed to continue if they build another short-term rental.
Thank you, Mr. Costafoli. You have about 10 seconds, so are you finished with your presentation? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So while we'll move on to public, well, first I'll see if my colleagues have any questions for you currently. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Daniel. Some of the input we've received in our packet comes from the code compliance folks. I wonder if you could provide us with a status of some of the code compliance violations, some outbuildings that I think you indicated would be removed. If you could speak to that, please.
Correct, yes. The photo that was on the presentation shows the property in its current condition. So all the structures have been removed from the property, and it sounds like the previous owner had some code compliance issues. She had built some structures that were extending over some utility easement lines and whatnot, and those have all been demoed with permits.
Okay.
Thank you. Another question related to that is, it looks like you've demolished the previous house for all the reasons. I think one of the requirements was to do asbestos testing. And Can you speak to that, what the outcome of the testing was regarding?
Yes, yeah, we hired WeCycle Environmental to come in and test all of the structures, and they all tested negative.
Clean? It's
Clean,
below
yeah.
whatever levels,
No asbestos at all.
no asbestos.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm good for now, I think.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens, do you have any questions? I don't have any current questions right now. I may after public comment, but thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll open public comment, and I will start with the room and see if anyone's in the room. You will have 3 minutes for public comment. If you'd like to make a public comment regarding this land use item, number 23-ZONE 3482. Please raise your hand. You have a moment to come to the podium. Okay, we have all of you, so that's great. We have each 3 minutes each, and you'll have to raise your hand and come forward. So how about let's start on the right side of the room. We'll start with there's two in the back row. I'll start with you, sir, and then if you'll come up and say your name and give us your public comment, you'd have 3 minutes. Thank you. And please identify yourself and where you live.
Thank you. My name's Gary Spivak. I live on Hollywood Street. You've actually probably seen the comments I submitted in writing, but I wanted to just emphasize a couple of points. I have a general concern with short-term rentals in the fact that they do decrease the available housing supply. Once a house is converted to a short-term rental, it can't be used to rent or sell to someone who might want to live in that neighborhood. And we do have a limited number of spaces in our neighborhood. So I don't like the idea in general. But more specifically about this particular one, and again, I want to emphasize that Dan's a neighbor. I have to sympathize with what he's had to say, and what I have to say is nothing personal. But I'm concerned about the fact that these applications for short-term rentals came in May. This one, as well as the one that's next on the agenda and the one that is still in review, just before the land use code was changed to allow this 500-foot, or to require this 500-foot separation between short-term rentals. This one and the one across the street will mean that there's 3 short-term rentals within a 500-foot radius. And I think that's just a little bit too crowded. I think there was a reason that the land use code was adjusted to prohibit that use, and I'd really like to ask the commissioners to take that into consideration for this particular application. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Okay, so now we'll move to that next same row, and if you have some public comment, would you please come forward to the podium, and you'll have 3 minutes, and identify yourself. Please come forward. Please identify yourself, where you live, and then we'll help keep the time. Thank you.
I'm Mary Beck. I live at 503 North Hollywood, and I got to say, they are good neighbors. My concern is this whole issue of short-term rentals and the idea that we have 2 issues I have. One is the long-term loss of housing. We are a neighborhood that is often that starter home feeling that gives our next generation a building equity and things like that. And I hate to say it, he maybe thinks in 20 years his daughters are going to stay around, but you can't count on these kids. There's another generation happening that are not getting housed. And you people, I know this county commissioners are very concerned about housing, to affordable housing. And that is what I was hoping our neighborhood is about. And as we keep turning them over to short-term rentals, we're losing that for our future generations. The other issue I have is there are only 3 employees for the county that handle code enforcements and violations. And things happen in people's lives, and this could be sold, but we have so many out-of-compliance structures in our neighborhood they call us the Wild West, where anything can go on Hollywood Street and Sunset. And there are so many already code compliance, and there's no way that they really enforce it. So I want you to keep that in mind as we are making these judgments of what's happening to our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Okay, so now I think it was the gentleman. You had your hand raised in front of the gentleman. Would you have? Is you want to make public comment on this issue? So would you please approach the podium, identify yourself and where you live? You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
My name's Jason Bruin. I live at 538 North Hollywood Street. I'm also a general contractor that currently has permission to work through the occupational licensing program. Please do not take anything personally because I certainly don't mean to be attacking anybody. I'm just trying to be frank.
Could you speak a little closer to the
You bet. My intention is to voice my support of Danny Crisafulli and Barefoot Properties property rights and my frustration with the excessive regulations that have been inflicted on the citizens of Larimer County. I'm not only a general contractor, I am a member of this community. I feel that it is none of my business, Larimer County's business, or anybody else's business if this property gets rented to a private citizen for 1 day or 1 year. I read the written comments that were submitted in the past on this hearing, and I don't think Larimer County should be regulating private property rights to prevent noise or speeding or littering. These behaviors are already regulated. If someone wants to live in a neighborhood that doesn't allow short-term rental businesses, maybe they should consider living in an HOA community with covenants. I remember when I moved here in the 90s, this was rated one of the freest places in the Union. The Libertarian Party was founded here. Our building official used to be a member of the Libertarian Party. Now we need to specialize in government regulations not only to have permission to rent owned property, but to make a living in our own community with the occupational licensing program, i.e. permission to make a living. From my point of view, we have unelected bureaucrats, not you folks, of course, that micromanage not only our businesses and our livelihoods, but also flex their new power over the citizens with short-term rental licensing requirements and all the occupational licensing requirements. I'm reminded of this every time I have a plan set, or I leave a plan set and permission application in a garbage can outside of a bureaucrat's locked door and pick up my permission to work off the floor outside the same locked door. I'm reminded of this every time I call the planning or building department and have to leave a voicemail and maybe get a call back that day, the next day, or maybe not. I'm reminded of that every time a real estate transaction is canceled because the buyer is intimidated by the short-term rental regulations. I'm reminded of this every time I sign a form acknowledging that Larimer County can revoke my occupational license, i.e. permission to make a living.
So, I apologize. Your 3 minutes have been over. Would you like to make a sentence to wrap up your comments? Thank you.
I'm reminded of this every time I build a house to a building code that makes it cost twice as much as it should, including my own house. I'm reminded of this every time Larimer County tells me I can't live in a camper on my own land for more than 6 months out of the year, and yet we have people living under bridges. I believe that the once respectable Larimer County planning and building departments are the reason we can't have affordable housing. I believe that God created us to love our neighbors and to let live and let live. Whatever happened to the spirit of liberty?
So, sir, I'm sorry, but you've been a minute over, and I apologize. Thank you. I'm sorry, sir. We can't have any outbursts during the meeting. You're welcome to come up and make a comment if you'd like for public comment. So, just trying to be fair that everyone gets the same amount of time. And that's how we kind of try to do here to make sure this process is fair and transparent. So we'll now move on to the next folks who would like to make public comment. And I thought I saw some folks on this side of the room. I'll go in the back of the room and move forward. So please come up and identify yourself, where you would live, and you can have 3 minutes for public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Regina Kohlmeyer. I live at 273 North Sunset Street. The majority of my nuclear family has spent our entire lives on Sunset, and I've never met these people in my life. I'm sure they're good neighbors. They've never caused us any problem. However, it appears that they are attempting to engage in gentrification of the neighborhood to benefit their children. My parents are my landlords. They live on the same street. And to be perfectly honest, if I had to buy the land that I live on today, I could never afford it. I could not afford to live in my own neighborhood. And I pay my parents' taxes because they cannot afford to pay their taxes in a house they've lived in for the majority of their lives. Because people are coming in, they're paying over what's necessary for land to turn it into a short-term rental or save it for their kids. Save it for your kids, I have no problem with that. But I do have a problem with the idea of living in a neighborhood full of short-term rentals. If people want to have an environment with hotels and such, East Mulberry has lots of land available. So pretty much what it comes down to is that there's at least 4 that we've gotten notices for short-term rentals, 2 of which are less than 1,000 feet from my house. And it does not seem fair to those of us who've spent our lives in the neighborhood to see other people making an additional living on their land when we couldn't even afford to buy ours if we had to now. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. I appreciate your public comment. Thank you. Okay, so now we'll move on to the next person and you said your name was Regina, right? Yes. Okay. Thank you. And so now we'll move on to the next public comment. I see your hands raised, ma'am. If you would come up to the podium and identify yourself and where you live, you'd have 3 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Donna Wormus, and I own the property on both sides of this. I own 423 and 325. People that rent Airbnbs if they don't have a favorable rating, then you just don't rent to them. So you get people that are respectful, quiet, and friendly. Dee and Danny have their Airbnb that they built on their property, and it's adorable, beautifully landscaped, and I'm sure they'll do the same kind of job with this rental that they want to build, and we've never had any issues with their renters. They're really good people.
Thank you. Is that your public comment?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for your public comment, and we'll move on to the next person. As anyone else in the room would like to make public comment? Okay, let's move on to online. Rebecca, do we have anybody online who'd like to make public comment on this land use application?
So as a reminder, if you're watching on Zoom, if you would like to make a public comment on this application, the Barefoot short-term rental, please use the raise hand button on the Zoom control bar to indicate that you would like to speak. Just giving it a moment. And we do not have any hands raised online.
Okay. Well, with that, then I guess we'll close public comment. And we'll move on to the time of rebuttal. So I will invite the applicant to come back up. You'll have 5 minutes or less for your rebuttal if you'd like to take that time. So come on back up and I'll have your time for rebuttal.
Thank you. I think just to speak to the concerns around affordable housing, I obviously have that same concern. I don't know that my kids are going to be able to afford a house in 20 years. Unfortunately, I don't think that a 1-acre parcel at the price you have to pay for that combined with construction costs today, it doesn't create an affordable house. If you were going to build 1,000 square foot house on that parcel, you'd be almost $800,000 into the house. That's not affordable housing. So I unfortunately don't think that that this property is an option for affordable housing. Nor is that, what I'm applying to do. I certainly can empathize with what our neighbors are saying, and some of which I actually agree with. Obviously, the affordable housing side of it, as far as pulling housing supply from, as far as pulling supply from current housing, there is no supply here. The house that was there needed to be torn down, and so it is either vacant land or it is built to be something. And it's our opinion that it shouldn't stay vacant land, that doesn't benefit the community. And what we're trying to do, we think, does benefit the community. That's all my comment.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I just want to make sure, I was making some notes, make sure you had your full rebuttal time if you have it. So I'm not sure if my colleagues will have questions, so you want it for the applicant, so I don't want to make you have to walk steps and come back. So we'll go ahead and start. And so your rebuttal time is ended, just for the record. So I'll start with questions from Commissioner Kafalis. Obviously, you have questions for the applicant or for staff?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I think it's okay to go back and forth because you get more steps in, and that's always a good thing. I think I'll start with a question for Daniel.
Daniel, yes.
The comment made by the first individual, Gary Spivak, regarding, we are considering this proposal with the previous short-term rental regulations, and under those regulations, there was no 500-foot separation. I'm wondering if you care to comment on that, and that might get to what I was bringing up earlier. It wasn't so much tied into the growth management area, but maybe the reference was to the previous regs with the current regs. I don't know, Daniel, if you want to offer some thoughts
I'm happy
there.
to comment. In my meetings with, ideally, we would build the house, and then once the house is built, we'd be going through this process. In my initial planning meeting with Larimer County, they encouraged that we go ahead and apply because as of June, we had to apply prior to June 1st. As of June 1st, the new I'm not going to use the right terminology, land use code comes into effect. If our application came in prior to June 1st, then we would be operating on the previous land use code, i.e. we'd have the potential to utilize this as a short-term rental.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Do you have a question? So I do. So even the previous land use code, we've sat through some short-term rentals. We did have as discretion, and we still have it under the old code and the new code, discretion about whether this has impact on the community. And we did have a lot of discussions with other neighborhoods where the density is an issue. And this is something we still can consider, whether it's 500 feet or not, if we think the density in that neighborhood would be an issue in changing the culture or the community or having a negative impact on the current or future development. So I want to be clear for those folks is that just because it's not written in the code, I still feel we have used that in past about the criterion discretion of the Board of County Commissioners, whether this is, the density is an issue. And there have been neighborhoods where this is a density. And I do have a concern that you have one across the street, there's another one, and it sounds like your neighbor, it's very close, and it's and there sounds like there's more coming. So this could be a very dense area very quickly. So my concern is, you talk about having your community and everyone over to come and view that. There seems there are neighbors that are supportive and neighbors that are not, that are concerned, and ones that have lived there a long time and worry about gentrification and not being felt like this neighborhood is still somewhere where they fit in or belong. Mm-hmm. And when you have a lot of houses that are not owner occupied and that are changing a lot of folks coming in and out. Do you understand how this might be impactful to the noise, the traffic, the climate of the neighborhood, and for those folks who are there living there that have lived there maybe longer than you have? And I'm just curious, have you thought about that for? I know that you wanted to get this under the old code, but this still is a point that we can consider as county commissioners about the density or potential density in this neighborhood, especially when it's next to Fort Collins, having this zone where they want it owner occupied. So I'm curious if you had thought about, understood that also is still a criteria that we can consider, and you thought about how this is kind of changing that neighborhood for folks that have lived there for a long time.
I do understand, yeah, and I think one of the benefits that we have being where we're at is we're literally next door. You know, we're next door to our current short-term rental, and we're one lot away from the proposed short-term rental. So if there's a noise issue, I am hearing that noise issue. We have never had that happen at our current short-term rental. We do make it very clear that we live right next door and that we have kids running around on the property. And all I can say is it hasn't been an issue. And we would obviously have the same concern as any other neighbor because we are neighbors to it as well. As concerning your question about traffic, one of the things that we've noticed owning a short-term rental is there's actually decreased traffic on the property. We sit at about 75% occupied, which means that 75% of the days there's traffic coming and going, and 25% of the days nobody is coming and going. So as far as traffic goes, it's actually probably utilized less. Same as, some of our neighbor comments were concerned with the utility usage. Same goes for that. It's just not being occupied 100% of the time. I think that the concerns as to whether or not it's changing the neighborhood, it's certainly a different use. Whether or not it's changing it, for good or for bad, I think that's, it's open for interpretation. That's a subjective opinion. Our opinion has been that it's been really beneficial to the neighborhood. Just this last week, we've had friends in our unit that their marriage is having a hard time, and we're able to open that up to them, and they're able to get their own space. And there's not much space for that in our neighborhood because there are not many short-term rental options currently. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but.
You answered my question, but I still, we talk about property rights and people that do, but also what you're doing, your property impacts the people around you, and they also have property rights to have,
Sure.
kind of those things. And so I always have that concern and question because you're trying to balance the concerns of the neighbors versus what you like to do and utilize with your property. And I think when it comes to these short-term rentals, it does change and impact the neighbors. And so you just get one person who, has one issue or does something and it just takes once, right? And so I think that it's important for me when I consider the balance of this as we have land use applications, we try to look at the whole package. And I just want to be clear that just because it doesn't say in the ones you're applying in the old regs, it would still have that condition of the discretion of the density. And that is something we still can consider. So a lot of folks try to get in before the 500, but that still is as a discretion as commissioners that we can consider about the density. So I wanted to be clear about that I have a concern about that. So
I understand. If I could make one more point, I think you make a valid point, and I do think you have to look at it the other way as well. With a short-term rental, if you're averaging somebody staying about 2 nights, which is what we average, then those are folks coming and going consistently. We've had the experience of having a tenant occupy a property close by that was not a good experience, and that tenant is in the lease for a year, and it takes a year to process through that difficult situation. So I do think you have to look at it the other way, that if there's a difficult situation, which again we haven't had, but certainly could happen, that processes through rather quickly.
Okay, I appreciate your comment. Colleagues, do you have any other questions for the applicant or staff? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess we don't have any questions. Well, I'm assuming that we're ready for deliberation. So we'll start. Commissioner Kafalis
I have questions of our,
for staff. Okay, Commissioner.
esteemed staff. May I proceed?
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you. Let's see. Would you provide further clarification on the current land use code STR regs adopted June 1st regarding separation requirements? Because I know there's some, the 500 foot certainly applies in the Estes Valley. It's 250 feet up in Red Feather. What about the rest of unincorporated? Could you clarify that, please?
Yes, the 500-foot separation requirement is countywide aside from the Red Feather Lakes area where it's 250 feet.
Okay. Well, you answered my question. My next question is regarding the comments that were made by Mary on enforcement and that we have three code compliance folks. Could you explain a little bit about what we've put in place to help with better enforcement of short-term rental regulations, the mapping and all that kind of stuff?
Sure, yes. Happy to talk about how we're trying to supplement our staff with some additional tools. It's true, we have 3 co-compliance inspectors that are responsible for the entire county. We do have a priority system for responding to complaints and issues as they arise that prioritizes any issues that present life safety concerns or significant neighborhood impacts first over other potential violations for enforcement. For short-term rentals specifically, we also pay for an external kind of vendor software program that helps monitor illegal short-term rentals out in our community. So those are short-term rentals operating without a license or without an approval from the county. And that's kind of an ongoing, daily operation that's happening. And as we identify rentals that are operating out of compliance, a cease and desist letter goes out. We have an enforcement process. We're currently onboarding a new vendor that will streamline that process a little bit more for us as well. So we have done some things to try to augment what we're capable of doing as staff by bringing in this external vendor to help specifically with short-term rentals.
Okay, one more.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'll add that vendor also maintains a 24/7 hotline to receive complaints and route complaints to the property manager. So I know we've talked a little bit about, contacting property managers, which is always an option, but there's also always an option for someone to use the hotline phone number that's on our website to call, so they don't have to look up somebody's contact information. And our vendor will route it directly to and kind of navigate the back and forth between a complainant and a property manager, particularly if it's after hours or on the weekends.
Thank you again. My last question is regarding the comments that, is it Regina, I believe? Regina?
Yes, Regina.
Yeah. What is the data or evidence that shows that, there's a direct correlation between short-term rentals? We know that it does take houses off the market for long-term rentals. And I think there's some evidence data there for sure, especially in the mountain resort communities. But in terms of property values, is there, that you're aware of, Rebecca, any data evidence that shows the correlation between, more short-term rentals and property values? This reappraisal has hammered all of us, and I think we're all reacting to that. And it's been very challenging for a lot of folks who don't make a lot of money. Can you speak to that at all, Rebecca?
Sure. Yeah, I'm certainly not the expert in this area, and this is short-term rentals is a landscape that's really evolving and has changed a lot, just even in the last several years during and post-COVID. So I think some of the impacts are also kind of changing and evolving. The regulatory landscape's also changing too at the state level. There's been talk about adjusting property tax kind of assessment rates for short-term rentals, things like that. So it's definitely a dynamic moving system, and it would be hard to draw kind of definitive conclusions out of that, I think. I think there are a lot of concerns nationwide as short-term rentals become more and more of a business that is attractive to people, that there are concerns about driving property values up in an area because a property can be more lucrative in some way or another. But I would be careful about applying broad generalizations specifically to a particular neighborhood or a particular community, because the situation's just very different in every community.
Thank you again. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens? Okay. Okay, well, I think then we're ready for deliberation. We'll start with Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So, thanks to everyone who came out today and, and who also voiced their opinions via email, because while there were only a handful of people that came today, we had, I think in total, 11 neighbors that voiced concerns regarding the application. We received 2 additional ones today. So, there's some question on the kind of regulations that we enact as county commissioners. And, I think that in large part we try to maintain a balance in our community. We are certainly not against people making money, but we also have to take neighborhood concerns into consideration. So, and that's why we have regulations that we feel are fair and good, and it's our job to apply those regulations. I am inclined to not support this application. In hearing from the neighbors, and, like I said, that includes neighbors that emailed in, as well as neighbors that came forward, it does feel like that we're not meeting criteria 1, which is the proposed use has minimal impacts on existing and future development of the area. I feel like it does have major impacts on the community, and the community members have stated that. This feels like a lodging situation to them, and they already have that in the neighborhood, and that can feel uncomfortable to have people coming and going out of a small, pretty dense rural neighborhood. Does not have the expectation that there are going to be what feels like a commercial situation in their neighborhood. And so I think that increasing the number of short-term rentals in this neighborhood would have an impact. And the neighbors have stated so. 11 neighbors have stated so, several in person, quite a few online, that this just doesn't feel right for their neighborhood. It doesn't fit within the character of the neighborhood. So because it does not meet the criteria number 1, I will not be supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Commissioner Kofalis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, appreciation to folks who came and offered their thoughts on this particular application and insights. I'm really struggling with this one, having lived on that street back when times were simpler a long time ago. And I know that there is a very unique character there. I'm stuck on this criterion 1. The proposed use has minimal impacts on existing and future development. I think that there are impacts. You can't avoid those, but I think they're somewhat mitigated by the fact that the applicant is part of that neighborhood and lives on that street and is invested in that neighborhood. So I guess I have a different interpretation of a criterion when I think well, I think it's given what we've heard today, it's being met in terms of mitigation, in terms of commitment, and so I feel like the five criterion in 6.4.3.d have been met, and therefore I'd be inclined to support this. I also want to acknowledge, for me, one of the struggles here is, how do you find the right balance between the proper amount of regulations and property rights? And, property rights, of course, extend to people who own that property, but it also acknowledges the property rights of neighbors and other folks. And I'm going to trust that that's going to help with this particular proposal. So I'm inclined to support.
Thank you, Commissioner. And so I will start with thanking everyone who came out today. These are never easy, these land use decisions, and it's probably one of the hardest parts of being a county commissioner because, as I stated before, I live in unincorporated Larimer County. I have property. I know it's different when you have larger properties and you have property rights and you have your uses, but also I always struggle with that balance because I do know we've heard from dozens of folks who whoever's doing what their property impacts their neighbors in a negative way. And how do we balance that? How do we address that? And that's why we have protections. I know people talked about regulations, but these are protections also. I find that they're rules, but they're for a reason because we wanted to make sure it's a fair and transparent and consistent process that everyone has the same rights and ability to do things with their property, and it's applied the same way to everyone who applies. And so it is a very big concern, and we've had struggled with this as many other counties with this astronomical increase in short-term rentals in neighborhoods that were residential, that folks have lived there for decades and feel like their neighborhoods are changing in front of them. And then I hear about the property rates. We're all struggling with the increase in property rights or property taxes and values, and this is a large increase largely due to property values have gone up because people are buying homes and moving here or buying second, third, and fourth homes and turning them into investment properties. And this is something that we've been wrangling with and struggling with for a long time. And I think I appreciate that the owner is living right next there, and they already have one there next to them. But I do think one thing that we always considered with previous ones before we had the new regs, and that's the reason we put that in, was that density is an issue. I think when we have them all coming into a small neighborhood this way, and we start having them being in a dense point in this neighborhood, and I appreciate that we're looking at next to the city of Fort Collins in a growth management area, and most of those are owner occupied. And I know the owner lives next door, but it's still different when you don't live in it, you're not renting just out of room. And so, and I appreciate the owner wanting to pass on to something to his children. We'd all love to be able to do that. And we all concerned about our future generations being able to afford homes. But I do think that if we have a lot of these coming in because they're trying to get in front of the new regulations, that we still have the ability to have this discretion to worry about density. I also have a concern, this is the first one, but I don't want to start a precedent that people can buy a property and start to build and go for a short-term rental regulation right off, or license right off the bat. I know it's a great opportunity for us to be able to build that building with all the right codes and all those other things. I think that's a great plus and pro and for that. But I also, I just wonder, what that looks like for the future. So I really struggle with this one as well. I think that I think the owner is heartfelt and really wants to be, is a good neighbor, wants to continue to be a good neighbor, and I know is trying to utilize his properties for the benefit of his families and his neighbors. It sounds like he allows his neighbors to rent this out for guests, and I think that's great. But I still worry that if we approve these, then we have a very dense area, which is something that we changed with that we really changed with our new regulations. And so until the end of this hearing, I wasn't sure how I was going to vote on this, but I'm really struggling with how I want to vote. And I just, I think, I agree with Commissioner Stevens that I don't believe criteria 1 has been met. I think that knowing it's in the growth management area, knowing what Fort Collins' levels are, I'm concerned that we're giving a license for a structure that has not been built, and I'm really concerned about the future density of that neighborhood. So with that, I think I'm going to have to be inclined not to support this application. So, which I really struggled to come to that conclusion. I really wanted to hear from all the neighbors and read through, and also hear from the applicant. And so I think after hearing from my colleagues, I feel that I will not be able to support this application as well. So I will ask Commissioner Stevens if she wouldn't mind making this this motion, please.
Yes, Madam Chair. I move that the Board of County Commissioners deny the Barefoot Real Estate LLC short-term rental file number 23, zone 3482.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Any further discussion, Commissioner? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 2-1, and thank you all. I appreciate everyone being here today, and we'll move on now to our last application. And thank you all for coming today and making public comment. So we will now move on to our next agenda item, which is our third discussion item for today, which is the Torgensen Short-Term Rental Administrative Special Review, file number 23-ZONE 3495. And it looks like, Mr. Christensen, you get 3 for 3 today.
3 for 3. Madam Chair, through you again, Mark Christensen with the Larimer County Planning Department. Again, this is Torgerson short-term rental. It is land use code 23-ZONE 3495. We'll advance this. All right, the subject property is located at 2843 West Vine Drive, addressed in Fort Collins at the 80521 zip code. It is located south of Vine Drive in the Rostec addition. The applicant requests an administrative special review approval for a small short-term rental located in the existing 4-bedroom plus 1 additional sleeping area single-family residence for a maximum occupancy of 10 total guests, 2 per bedroom. Again, the property owner is Travis Torgerson. The zoning is RR2, rural residential, lot size of 0.16 acres, and it is with Sunset Water, Fort Collins Sanitation, the Poudre Fire Authority, and access off Vine Drive. Again, short-term rental is defined as a dwelling rented to transient guests for short-term lodging when not occupied by the owner and renter. The STR use is classified as commercial lodging facilities and is permitted in the RR2 Rural Residential Zone District following administrative special review. 87 postcards were mailed to neighbors within the vicinity of the proposed application. We received written comments from 10 community members in opposition to the proposed STR, with all comments provided in attachments E or the memo provided today. The following review criteria are those that the Board of Commissioners should consider when they review one of these applications. In addition to these review criteria for the use-specific standards, the following criteria should be made. The administrative special review process authorizes the director to approve applications by which all criteria are met and there are no substantive issues. If the director determines that the application is unusually complex or raises potential unique or serious impacts on the county or the surrounding areas, the director may refer the application to the Board of County Commissioners for decision under the same criteria by which they applied to the application. Staff has found that this specific application has met criteria in section 3.3.5B2 and meets 3 of the 5 criteria in section 6.4.3D. Again, staff does not have conclusive evidence that the application meets criteria 1 or 2 of section 6.4D. The development services team is not making a recommendation on the short-term rental file number 23 zone 3495 and has presented all the information that the county commissioners should consider with their deliberation and decision. With that being said, we have two potential motions for this application, and I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. I appreciate that presentation and all the presentations today. You done a great job presenting. So colleagues, do you have any questions currently for the staff? I had a quick question. I was looking at the map, and when you talk about it's on a 0.16 of an acre, and 10, applying for 10 guests, and I'm wondering with off-street parking, and then on Vine, do we have concerns about parking and off-street parking and things like that impacts to the neighbors that way? Because I don't think there's parking allowed over on Vine Street, if I'm correct.
Chair, through you with the parking, there would not be parking permitted in the right of way. And I do not believe the engineering department had any issues with the parking being that was illustrated on the proposed plan.
Okay, so they've looked at the driveway and think that the cars could handle, I mean, is it supposed to be limited to 2? I'm just curious because it looks to me very small about the amount of parking and.
So yeah, when I reviewed this under the old code, it was required to have 2 parking spots, and the applicant did provide 2 parking spots, and we did put in our comments that they are not able to park on the right-of-way.
On the street or the other side? Okay.
Correct.
But it's still for 10?
Correct. It's for 10 or under. That's our parking regulations with the land use code.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. And then there was it. I think I'll wait my next question. I will go ahead and wait. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a follow-up, if I may, to the parking question, my understanding is that the City of Fort Collins did offer some comment or raise a question about if the current application is for 10 guests, an additional sleeping area, 4 bedrooms, et cetera, and they question the ability of this home to accommodate up to 10 persons with only 2 available spaces. And then I think I saw in the application a 3rd space might be available in the garage. Would you comment on that?
I just used our land use code to provide comments. I did not go into Fort Collins land code and our land use code.
Yeah, but don't we have to take into consideration referring agency comments?
That's correct, but I was just reviewing based on Larimer County's land use code.
Is it correct that there are 2 parking spaces and there potentially is a 3rd one in a garage?
I can't speak to the 3rd one, but on their site plan, they did provide 2 parking spaces.
Okay, I reckon the applicant will speak to that.
Yes, and I can just add that, the comments that were from City of Fort Collins as a referral agency from their traffic operation department wasn't referencing a specific standard in Fort Collins code. It was just kind of questioning whether it was adequate. If there were a situation where the City of Fort Collins had a specific standard that they were citing and felt like that needed to be required, then that's something we could consider, within the GMA, whether whether it's worth adding that as a condition of approval. But in this case, I see that it was more of a kind of a question or a suggestion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens, any further questions or wait till applicant? Okay, let's go ahead and have the applicant come forward and present. You'd have 10 minutes. And please state your name and welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, my name's Travis Torgerson. Thank you guys for caring about our community and giving me the opportunity to speak. So, yeah, next slide, please. Just a little bit about us. I'm a registered nurse at Poudre Valley Hospital, and my wife Gabriella teaches kindergarten at Shepherdson. We have a rambunctious 2-year-old son. We're expecting our second in about a month and a half. I want to emphasize just that we love our neighborhood and are excited to raise our kids here. We were able to apply for short-term rental status because we had the opportunity to purchase a home around the corner. And we would be living in very close proximity, less than a 5-minute walk when we start to rent this home out. Next slide, please. So why are we pursuing short-term rental approval? It's a huge priority for us to keep a parent home to raise our children, and running an STR will enable us to work from home while staying engaged as a parent. It is more profitable than working as a teacher or a part-time nurse, and this will enable us to afford having a parent home full-time. And it also provides lodging in an area with limited options that has kind of been spoken to in some previous presentations as well. It allows us to host visiting families and is within walking distance of the smaller homes in this neighborhood that might make it difficult to host. We also want to share our love of this area with our guests and experience the amazing proximity to natural areas, downtown, Horsetooth Reservoir, etc. Next slide, please. Consideration of neighbors' concerns. One comment we received was that there's a lack of public benefit, but we believe that this provides lodging in proximity to families in the area and that is a public benefit, and also tax revenue from this rental and from guests visiting the Fort Collins establishments. I agree with the need for more long-term rentals, and I do know several long-term rentals near our home, both on Hollywood and on Vine. And we're not opposed to future long-term rental developments in the area, which I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then density of short-term rentals in the area. According to the approved lodging facility map, there were no other short-term rentals within 500 feet. And I understand that you will use your discretion whether or not the density is too high or if there are any conditions we can come to terms on for this decision. Noise was another concern, and we intend to use privacy-protecting sound and smoke monitors installed inside and outside the home. So we would be notified and would intervene before things would ever escalate to a disturbing level. We would also notify our guests of these devices upon booking. Next slide, please. And another concern is that this would decrease the quality of the neighborhood. But I believe that using this home as an STR will encourage to keep up the curb appeal, so to speak. So one comment specifically was concerned that this would make our neighborhood more derelict. But as a DIY enthusiast and gardener, I believe this rental will enable me to improve at least the aesthetic draw of both this rental and our home just around the corner. The rental platforms we will use will also allow us to be selective with who rents our home, and we would be able to cancel bookings for guests with concerning reviews. Another concern was pets, and no pets would be allowed in our rental. If we ever did allow pets, which I doubt we will, they would only be allowed in the fenced side yard. Capacity, we have hosted groups of 10 or more at times when we've had lots of family in town or friends visiting. And with 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and a spacious living area, we believe this home is ideal for hosting groups of this size. But if there is a condition to reduce our max occupancy, we'd be more than willing to do that for approval. Next slide, please. Privacy was another concern. And one suggestion was that we put up a privacy fence, and I am not opposed to that either, but we would have to be careful with how we were to construct that, not to obstruct views for traffic pulling onto Vine from Hollywood. And also, I don't believe our home is very conducive for outdoor living. Part of why we're moving is because of the proximity to West Vine. So I think it may be less obtrusive to neighbors if our guests prefer to stay inside anyways. Parking, driveway space for 2 large vehicles is available, and we have a large garage that could accommodate a vehicle as well. So we believe this provides enough parking for 10 guests. And having traveled with groups of 15 or more when I go on trips with my wife's family, we usually travel in 3 vehicles. So I believe that is reasonable for parking. And the parking areas will be clearly marked, and guests will be made aware that there's absolutely no parking allowed in the right-of-way or on the side of the street. Next slide, please. You all are probably familiar with the Northwest Sub-Area Plan, and it was established by the city back in 2006 and the county. And we're currently zoned RR2, and should this plan come to fruition, this short-term rental would be, I believe, in alignment with the urban estates allowed uses as a low-intensity commercial use. That was, according to this plan, like the future zoning for our property. Next slide, please. And we believe that using a home as a short-term rental would also, as the plan states, safeguard the character of these existing neighborhoods rather than building motel or hotel or a similar establishment. Next slide, please. And we're also not opposed to future development for long-term rentals in this area, so long as they are in line with this plan or the zoning that comes into place there. Next slide, please. Other support for approval, part of why we are moving is because I spoke to this earlier, but this home is just not ideal for our growing family, and we saw this as an opportunity to, an opportunity to be able to afford to continue keeping one of us home with our kids as we expand our family. And we're close with our immediate neighbors, and none of them have expressed concern about our desire to short-term rent this home. Our nearest neighbor said that he would come down and support us if he needed to, but I did not ask him to do that because I know it is difficult for him to leave his home for extended amounts of time. Next slide, please. Our goal is to maintain an occupancy rate of 60 to 80%, so our rental would probably have less traffic and be less obtrusive to our neighbors than it is now. We would also list for 30-plus day rental periods, which could provide furnished housing for business travelers, university staff, healthcare professionals, or displaced homeowners. This home is a single-story ranch home with no stairs and a walk-in shower and 1 bathroom, so it could easily be accessed by wheelchair if we installed a small ramp up the single step in front of our house. So if approved for short-term rental status, this would provide a unique lodging option that we intend to make even more accessible to individuals that would benefit from an easily accessible home visiting the area. And as a closing thought, I just think it's worth stating that I've personally invested a lot of time and resources into this project, and we just really hope that we can come to some conclusion that allows us to short-term rent this home. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Colleagues, do you have any questions at this time for the applicant? Commissioner Kafalis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Travis. I think it's an appropriate question. What is the square footage of your house?
Almost 1,500 square feet.
Oh, it's almost 1,500?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all.
I think I'll wait for public comment and maybe have some questions afterwards. Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, so unless Commissioner Stevens, you didn't have any. Okay, so let's move on to public comment. We will open public comment, and I'll start with anyone in the room. Anyone in the room would like to make public comment, please, one at a time, come up to the podium and state your name and where you live, and you would have 3 minutes for public comment.
Okay, thank you. My name again is Gary Spivak, and I live on Hollywood Street. I don't want to repeat the general comments I made about short-term rentals, but specifically, I just wanted to look at this parking situation again. I know that the current residents do park on the street, and I don't know that they could prevent other, guests from doing so. The problem is that it's a very small lot, and I guess I'm not clear about exactly what's meant by the right-of-way, because a lot of people like to walk in our neighborhood. It's a very popular place to walk. And when their cars are parked in front of this house, or either on Vine or Hollywood, a walker has to walk either in the bike lane or in the street. I mean, there's just no extra pedestrian room. So again, what is the right of way there, and how can we prevent parking from occurring there? Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Okay, I'll invite the next person for public comment to come up and identify yourself. Come to the podium. You'd have 3 minutes. Please identify yourself, where you live, and you'd have 3 minutes.
Mary Beck, 503 North Hollywood Street. And Danny, you would have done a good job, okay? But I still have these issues about traffic and parking, and if 10 guests, you don't know if it's just one family, if it's a group of people just out to, unrelated family members. That's a lot of cars possible. And once more about this enforcement of code across the street from this dwelling on Hollywood Street and Vine, there is a short-term rental already there in 3 Airstream trailers. You know that, people? There are right across the street, and nobody is regulating them. I don't think that short-term rentals even qualify to be in trailers, but they park right on that edge too. And when we walk there every single day, ask my dog. And it gets a little tricky trying to navigate out in the streets because there are cars parked in that area. Because of the lack of regulations in our neighborhood, this could just be a more potential problem down the road. And the only people that are, if I have a complaint about zoning or code enforcement, once again, as I've expressed to you before, I have to be the one that puts my name on that complaint or nothing happens. And in this day and age, it is getting more and more dangerous and more problematic that I have had people making comments to me because I have expressed concerns about violations. I feel like, what is this, Texas with the vigilantes coming out? Because we have to be the ones that turn these people in and put our name on it, and we are endangering ourselves. So, good luck.
Thank you for your public comment. Okay, anyone else in the room would like to make public comment? Okay, Rebecca, can we go online and see if anybody online would like to make public comment on this land use application 3495?
Yes, again, if you are watching on Zoom and you would like to make a public comment on this application, the Torgerson short-term rental, please use that raise hand button on your Zoom control bar. Giving it a moment, and again, seeing no hands raised.
Okay. I'll just give it one more second about public comment. Okay, so we will now close public comment, and we will allow the applicant to have a rebuttal time of 5 minutes if you'd like to come up and do a rebuttal time. And then we might have questions after that. Thank you.
Yeah, Travis Torgerson again here. I would just say for parking, we would have a camera installed on the front of the house, so we'd be able to see if anyone was parking in the right of way or on the street or on the side of the street. So that's all I will comment on for the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. So we'll now close the rebuttal time, and we'll move on to questions from the commissioners. Commissioner Stevens, did you have any questions?
None right now.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Two questions for staff. One is regarding the questions raised about right-of-way. Could you clarify what we mean by right-of-way, or show us some pictures so people can understand what the potential impact might be on pedestrians walking along Vine Drive? So that's one question. And could you, I forgot your name. What's your name?
I'm David.
You're Pringle, the last
Yes,
name?
David Pringle.
In the engineering.
Correct.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Yeah.
Regarding your question, the right-of-way parking would be any on-street parking, and the applicant would be required to have their short-term renters be in the driveway or in the garage. Any on-street parking would be a violation and be reported to code compliance.
And perhaps thank you. That was my understanding. They're not allowed to, short-term rentals, you're not allowed to park on a public right-of-way. Isn't that correct? Could you give further explanation of the dimensions on that particular section of Vine or West Vine Drive? You have a 2-lane street. There's no sidewalk, and so the right-of-way. How far does that extend towards the property line? A map. I'm good. I like looking at pictures.
So with this project, I can't give you an exact distance of that right-of-way, but they're going to be required to be in the driveway, in the complete driveway. As you can see, that truck would be okay within that driveway, but if it nosed out like 3 more feet or something like that, it'd be against, it'd be a violation and be reported to code compliance.
So when this, if I may, when this picture was taken, this map, there seems to be a car parked right there on North Hollywood. Is that just?
That won't be permitted as parking for the short-term rental. The only parking that's allowed in the short-term rental would be on that driveway or in that garage.
Yes. Thank you. I think that answers my question, and I think the map is helpful. I just want folks to understand what we mean by right-of-way and what the impacts might be should this be approved, as far as people being able to walk, a lot of walking out there. I have a second question, and that is, the issue at hand is whether or not to approve this short-term rental application with the various conditions of approval, or perhaps deny. And there was an issue raised about another situation on North Hollywood, which is a separate matter. But I wonder, is it appropriate, Rebecca, to say a few words about our code compliance process and how it's complaint driven at this time? We are looking at changing that perhaps. And also, is there a process for folks to file anonymous complaints? If that's appropriate, if we're.
Sure, I'm happy to speak to our compliance process. We are primarily a complaint-driven code compliance system, and that's due to the geographic size of the county, the amount of area to cover for our inspectors, and then the need to be able to prioritize issues that may be causing an impact in a neighborhood or in a particular area. When there is a clear life safety implication, we do act proactively in those situations. For example, a business that's operating within a floodway, or something that's a clear building code violation that's an unsafe condition. So there are cases where we do act without complaints. In terms of anonymous complaints, our preference is to have a name and a contact information associated with the complaint so that we can follow up to get more information or to provide resolution on the complaint. Often you may receive a complaint that is incomplete, or we don't have an exact location, or we need more information in order to really to investigate or pursue any kind of enforcement. And so that is an essential component of having some kind of additional information at times. We do accept complaints directly from the county commissioners, from you all. And so there is a mechanism for someone to complain via a county commissioner that then gets directed towards staff for enforcement. Though our preference is to receive all complaints from an individual with contact information so that we can get more information or follow up as needed.
But indeed, if a complaint is submitted through a county commissioner, there is some semblance of anonymity there. Yes?
Yeah, yes, it's possible to remain anonymous in that sense. It often impedes our ability to actually take a particular case to court or to pursue full enforcement, and build a full legal case in certain situations. So again, it's not our preference, but our goal is voluntary compliance. If we have information and on an issue, it does rise to a level of high priority, and we're able to follow up and gain voluntary compliance, then we can act in that way. But it does complicate our ability to fully enforce in certain situations.
Thank you once again.
Yeah, I have a, can we pull up the density map for this area? I mean, again, and I don't know how close, I can't remember how close this is to the other area, but
Working on it right now.
thank you.
And I see that Amy White had her hand raised. Did she have some things she wanted to add about the code compliance? It's on my screen.
Yes, thank you. I was just checking on that because I just noticed her hand raised as well. Amy, is there anything that you would like to add?
The only thing that I wanted to add is that since the legislation that was passed statewide, HB 23-1287, I have been working with representatives from the different platforms, Airbnb and VRBO, and working with them, it will be easier for us to pull down illegal advertising, which we really haven't been able to do, and we've only been enforcing on properties that did have a complaint that there was an illegal short-term rental. So hopefully that'll help us. I actually talked to the gal from VRBO on Friday, and she said if I have addresses at this point, I can forward those to them and they'll start the process. So that's going to be another enforcement piece that I think is going to help with a lot of this.
Thank you, Amy. And Commissioner Stevens, do you mind if I ask real quick a follow-up question to that? I don't, because your question about the density map was also a question I had. But I wanted to ask real quick, with this new process we have, you talk about the 24-hour line and someone can call in and file a complaint. So when they file a complaint or type that in or call, is that they have to put in their name and their number to file that complaint, or can they just do like the Safe Fort Collins has a nuisance call, I think, or something? So how does that new process look? Are they able to call in? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. They are able to call in, but because we don't accept anonymous, they need to provide their contact information so that we can get back with them if we need to. A lot of times what we get are, it's operating at this address, and then when we go to look it up, it's not at that address. And so then we don't know where it is. So it's still, that contact information is still required.
Thank you. Okay, for Commissioner Stevens' question, please.
Okay, so thank you for putting up the density map. Can you kind of put your little cursor or something around where exactly this, right there? Thank you. Oh yeah, Hollywood, I see it. I don't know why I wasn't seeing it before. Okay, thank you. And so With regard to, so I don't see a lot of other short-term rentals close to that. So with regard to the trailers, which isn't an allowed use, I believe, and so clearly they're operating, if they are operating as short-term rentals, they're operating illegally, and they're clearly not shown on the map.
Yeah, based on what we heard in the public comment, it sounds like it's probably a situation where there's some kind of violation happening. I'm not sure if our staff is aware of the issue, if we've received any kind of complaint or report on it. But you are correct that short-term rentals are not allowed in an RV or trailer or other mobile vehicle.
Thank you. So we will look into that.
Thank you, Commissioners. Do you have any other questions?
With the idea of the privacy fence, I don't know if staff has any thoughts on that, but one of the things that the owner said that they would consider it, but they felt like it would block maybe some people, like the view of people needing to turn onto Hollywood from Vine or vice versa. Do we have any opinion on that? Do we think that a privacy fence is usually like 6 foot tall? Is that right? So.
I'm looking at David to see if there might be any kind of sight distance considerations. Oh, thank you, Connor.
Connor Sheldon, Larimer County Engineering. Just here for support questions such as this one. So yeah, typically when there is interest in putting privacy fences on corners, we do run into sometimes issues with sight distance and turning the corner, things like that. So there are building code regulations. I don't know them off the top of my head. That's more of a traffic operations review, but there are building code regulations for those privacy fences and setbacks for that reason. If they were going to put something like that in, we would ask that they abide by all those codes.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me for now.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kafalis?
Well, on the matter of the privacy fencing, I appreciate that. Would it be helpful? I mean, it's very close to the neighbor to the east. Could a privacy fence be installed there to create more privacy? That might be a bit of a compromise to help with that issue. And that wouldn't necessarily impact sight distancing if it was on the Vine or the Hollywood Vine corner, right? I got thumbs up.
If that's something that you're considering as a condition, you may want to confirm with the applicant whether there's a fence existing there now or what the nature of that fence is. It appears from aerials and things like that, there may be a fence there now, so it might be worth confirming the existing condition.
Would you like to do that, Commissioner? Ask that of the applicant?
Yes, and then I might ask the applicant another question.
Certainly. Would applicant come to the podium, please?
Yeah, thank you. So the neighbor to the east, there's not a fence currently. There's a chain link fence that goes about halfway up to basically where our driveways start from the house out to the street. We would be more than willing to put a fence up there, but I think it's also worth noting that that's our neighbor, Don Mooney, and I've spoken with him about it. He has no concerns with privacy from his side of his property, but certainly we would comply with that if that were a condition for our approval.
And did you have another a question for him, Commissioner?
Oh yes, thank you. You expressed a willingness or an openness to go from 10 maximum to 8. I could be more supportive of this if we lowered the amount of folks who could be there.
Okay. Yeah.
he answered my question, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so, I'm just taking from my colleagues, that maybe they're ready for deliberation. Commissioner Gonzalez?
Well, with the understanding that we would reduce the maximum capacity of this proposed short-term rental from 10 occupants to 8, based on the 4 bedrooms, I would be supportive of this application. I think that the 5 review criteria, the ones in question, 1 and 2, I think the issue of adverse impacts, I mean, it will have an impact on the neighborhood. It always does. I'm sure my friends will be talking to me afterwards, but I think it's a minimal impact, and if the fact that both, Travis and his family, they live there, that's a greater ability to commit to making sure that we're all good neighbors. So I'll support it with the reduction from 10 to 8.
I appreciate that deliberation, Commissioner. I'm not sure. 8's slow enough for me. I'll have to see how my colleague feels. Commissioner Stevens?
So, thank you again for everyone who came out today. So, while this is in close to the same neighborhood, I do, and I kind of looked through, because there was a decent opposition to this short-term rental as well. But in looking through the letters, the opposition wasn't so much, some of it was that for people who don't like short-term rentals, and that's not one of our criteria. And I understand the issue of wanting to keep affordable housing in the community, but a lot of the letters that we received were with regard to parking issues, and the idea that they didn't want as many folks staying in this rental. So I definitely think we should go down to 8. I'll entertain what Commissioner Shattuck McNally is thinking with regard to space. Because I think 8 is 2 cars, and it sounds like 2 cars might more comfortably fit in the space that's available for parking. Definitely want the signs, and I don't know if that's one of the criteria. I gotta find the criteria page. But, I think definitely having signs to say don't park on the street sounds good, just because it sounds like that's been a problem in that area. So keeping the parking in the driveway or the garage is really important. And I do think that because it's in close proximity to other houses, the noise sensor, the noise sensors are just a good practice overall so I would have that as a condition as well. So, because those were the main concerns I heard were, I would say no pets, because it doesn't sound like there's much of a yard space, and there again, that goes to noise, especially in these denser neighborhoods. I think noise is, if you have acres of land between you and one house, noise isn't an issue. But when you're in a dense neighborhood, noise is definitely an issue. So, so I would say, no pets is one of the restrictions. The noise sensors, the only having 8 people, or if Commissioner Shattuck McNally wants less, let's talk about that. But I do think the fact that this is on a busier street kind of lends itself better to a short-term rental than something that feels like it's very much on a residential street. So I would be supporting with those amendments.
Thank you, Commissioner. And so I'll, again, struggling with some of this because it is such a tight lot and it is on a busy street. So I think that some of it will mitigate the neighbors on either side. I do, even with the Google map, we saw the parking with the car that was already illegally parked. And I just concerned, I could not support this with 10, that's for sure. 8 still sounds very, a lot. I'm thinking if they had, like, let's say there's 3 families instead of 2. And I think it's such a tight space. I appreciate the sensors. I think the signs would be really important. And I think any kind of maybe privacy fence on the other side, I forgot, was it on the east side? I think just giving some separation to give the neighbors some privacy. It's such a tight space that it just concerns me. And so I guess the biggest thing I have is that I just feel like 10 was way too much. I just don't know how that could even hold, with 2 cars, I still think it's pretty tight. And I would want to make sure that the neighbors, for me, the 500 feet is not enough for this. I would want to have a larger thing for the neighbors to know who to write and complain if there are cars that park illegally. And so I think that I'd like to have also the notification go to maybe, I don't know, 1,000 feet and across the street too, I guess, so that people know that how to write a complaint, how to do that. I would be important for me to be able to accept this, but if it had the noise centers, some privacy, and then we limit the amount, and if the applicant is really, I think they said they're only going to do 60 to 80% of the time. I'm looking at the applicant, 60 to 80%. We hear this all the time. We're only going to do this 90 days. But when you get the license, it's hard for us, and our staff don't have the ability to enforce that. And if you transfer this or something, which I'm not sure, I think this is one time, it's still, that person is not beholden to, because it's not a condition of approval. So I always feel like whatever you're saying, really, it's no way for you, that's going to be enforceable. You know what I mean? It's good faith, and I have found that doesn't always follow through. So I'm really reluctant when you say 68%. I just kind of meet that with heavy skepticism. So, and I apologize. I don't. It's not personal. It's just we have so many of these, and all I do is we get complaints all the time. Even this weekend, I hear complaints all weekend about Estes Park and one over here and then one in Berthoud by the golf course and just all these things. So it's something that we have to, to interact with. And I have one pulled up here that I'll have to talk to you about, Rebecca. So I feel like I could reluctantly support this because I do think this neighborhood is feeling the impacts. It seems like everyone's decided to try to get in before the new regs really take effect. And I feel, I can feel how this neighborhood feels like all of a sudden everyone's decided this is a great idea. And I just think I cannot support this with 10. So I'm itchy about eight. But I guess if it's 2 families and with small kids, I could see there could be 2 cars. But I definitely would say, I could be okay with 8 because I'm thinking maybe 2 families with 2 kids. But I would say I really don't even want to encourage. I want to encourage just 2 cars. That's it. Because I think if they're not going to park in the garage, and then it's just going to be too tempting to. So I would say 2 cars maximum for me, Commissioner, and the signs and the noise sensors, and then just the increased notification and knowing that still these are things that folks could. Still file a complaint, and and 3 strikes you're out. But I'll still think that's the neighbors having to deal with 3 times of disruption to the neighbors, and that's still an issue of the other property owners have rights to not have disruption just because someone wants to run a commercial business in a residential neighborhood, and that's what it is. So that's a problem for me. So and I think. I think I could reluctantly support it with that, Commissioner. I really don't like 8 still, but if we could limit it to 2 cars only with that 8, then I think I could do with that. Because if it's like 8 adults and then it's 3 cars or something, I feel like that's just too tempting about whether or not they're gonna use the garage, so I feel like if we could limit it to 2 cars and 8 people, I would feel more comfortable. Would you feel you could support that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Commissioner, could you support that?
Somebody's going to have to recount what's on the table at this
So,
point.
Commissioner,
I understand we're going from 10, we're okay with 10 to 8, and I'm a little bit confused about all the rest of it.
Okay, so Commissioner, I'm still kind of reluctant to do 8, so I said I could support 8 if we could go down to only allowing 2 cars. The only 2 in the driveway. And so Commissioner Stevens seems like she's supporting of that. So then we can make sure that if it's 8 adults, we're not looking at having multiple cars. And then Commissioner Stevens wanted to have signs saying no parking and a noise sensor installed. And then did we talk about maybe putting the privacy fence up with the neighbors to the east? And I think the applicant already acknowledged he was willing to look into that. So those would be 4 changes, and I think Commissioner Stevens and I are in alignment.
May I comment?
Yes, please.
On the matter of the sound sensor, and I think we're discussing these items as being put as conditions of approval.
Yes.
I thought in the presentation or in the material, the applicant is already planning to install a sound sensor. So therefore, I'm going to have to trust in that. I would prefer to just trust in that rather than putting it as a condition of approval.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I guess I would rather just, if he's going to do it, it seems like putting as a conditional approval is not,
And could someone, okay, that's fine.
be a barrier that, I mean,
we
if,
can
you
get
know, he's
all
gonna-
get on board here as long as the applicant understands what we're the conditions. A question, if I may, about the parking space, or did you say only allowing 2 cars, or?
Yes.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
they have been approved for 2.
I feel like it addresses a lot of the community, so I'm trying to get some balance here. And the balance that I'm trying to achieve is between some neighborhood things that I read through in 8 people that were against that, who were very concerned about the parking situation there. And so I think that Commissioner Shattuck McNally, I was assuming that going from 10 to 8 would allow for fewer cars. Commissioner Shattuck McNally is saying, let's just say, they have to be in 2 cars, and if they have a 3rd car, they're going to have to find a parking garage or somewhere else to park it.
So going down to 8 going down to 8 and only allowing 2 cars would address kind of that concern I have about the parking and the amount of people.
And I get the logic behind that. I'm just trying to understand. I thought that engineering has already signed off that there are 2 parking spaces, and that meets the code requirements. And then it seems like there's another space inside the garage. So could someone help me understand why we might need this to make sure that there are only 2 cars on the premise?
So when I wrote my comments, the applicant only proposed those 2 parking spots. He did not have the garage as a parking spot.
Okay.
So what I believe they're trying to move forward is that there's only 2 cars on that property, and that garage spot won't be another spot because only 2 would be allowed. Am I correct in assuming that?
So saying that you're approved for 2 parking spaces means you can only have 2 cars on there, right? Or not necessarily?
I would say not necessarily.
Okay, that's all I need to
Connor
know.
speak to this.
And that's fine, as long as I don't have to make the motion.
Just a quick comment of clarification. We review these sites for minimum parking, not
that again?
we
What?
review the sites for minimum parking, a minimum of 2 cars. We just want to make sure the sites are adequately parked. We don't review it for a maximum number of cars, just a minimum number of parking. But you can go that route, I think. That would probably be a question for the attorney, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm fine.
As long as we were suggested to ask the attorney, is that fine to do that?
I don't think there is any problem with that, if that is a condition.
I would feel more comfortable supporting it if we can say 8, but they still have 3 cars. And since this is the biggest issue for the neighbors and already we saw with that Google picture, there was someone parked in the right of way that shouldn't be, then I feel like, Commissioner Stevens and I seem to be in alignment that would really help with the neighbors' concerns that there are only 2 cars allowed. So I would feel better about that. So Commissioner Stevens, since Commissioner Gonzalez is, I could go ahead and support that and since those 4 conditions of approval, the applicant has confirmed the affirmative that he supports those. So Commissioner Stevens, would you mind making that motion?
Yes. I move that the Board of County Commissioners approve the Torgerson short-term rental file number 23, zone 3495, subject to the conditions listed in our packet and with the additional conditions being only allowing 8 guests in the home, only allowing 2 cars to be parked at the location not on the street, and that there will be a sign that says no parking on the street. That there will be noise sensors installed and a privacy fence will be erected.
And I had one more that I wanted to add, but go ahead, Commissioner.
Two comments or 2 points. One is that I think I heard you say, Commissioner Stevens, adding an additional condition of approval regarding the 10 to 8, but condition number 7, I think we would just need to amend that. Isn't that right?
Yes.
That would be fine.
You could amend that condition.
From 10 to 8.
Mm-hmm.
And also on the matter of the fence, if we're going down that route, we just want to clarify that it would be a fence on the east side of the property that would not block the site distancing that was pointed out, on the west side and that corner of Vine and Hollywood.
I believe I stated it in my motion, but Commissioner, would you mention that? And also, I asked for the condition to have the notification to more than 500 feet to maybe 1,000 feet, so more neighbors have that, since it's such a tight neighborhood, and there's a lot of people walking, and I just wanted to kind of increase that to 1,000 feet.
Can I just say accept those friendly amendments? I accept those friendly amendments. I accept those friendly amendments with regard to the fence and the notification being more widely spread out.
And amending conditions 7 to 8.
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, not to make things confusing, but just trying to make sure that we're addressing all the neighborhood concerns, and I appreciate my colleagues having that dialogue.
On the notification mailing, we've increased the radius, what?
To 1,000 feet, because it's a dense neighborhood. That means enclosing, I would include across the street as well, so.
I think normally it would include across the street, right?
I just want to make
Yeah,
sure.
that's correct. That radius would cross any streets. I just want to make sure we've got this kind of fully documented. So we would amend condition number 7 to limit the occupancy of the short-term rental to 8 occupants. Would limit the number of cars permitted to park on the site to 2 cars, which must be parked off-street, and a sign must be erected that says no parking on the street. A noise sensor or noise sensors would be required to monitor noise, and a privacy fence would be required to be erected on the east side of the property in compliance with any setbacks or site distance requirements that exist in county codes. And the apologies, I don't know which condition it is, the condition that relates to the notification to neighbors of the property manager contact information would be increased to 1,000 feet rather than 500 feet.
That would be number 10.
Thank you. Condition number 10.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
I don't mean to be difficult, but I want to point out something that maybe is important regarding posting a sign, a no parking sign on the road. That's a county arterial. Can a private property owner install a sign without getting permission from Road and Bridge?
I think we could have engineering respond to that
Or
question. I don't think the condition of approval specified a location for the sign, so I think that's a question we would ask, is if you would like to specify a location or what other requirements might
Glad
apply.
we're helping you to get your steps in there, Connie.
Yeah. I know our traffic operations manager would prefer that this sign be on the private property rather than in the right of way. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Connor. Commissioner, have all your questions?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Stevens, thank you for making that motion. Is there any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the motion on the table? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, there's no opposed, pass 3-0. We have gone through all of our discussion items today. Rebecca, do we have any other items? The other one was voted to be continued in 2 weeks. So with that, do we have any other further?
I will just note for the commission that we don't have Alyssa Martin here today, but she's one of our planners. This is her last week with the county. She will be moving on and relocating to the Chicago area. We're excited for her next opportunity. We're sad to see her go, and I know she's presented numerous times in front of this board, so just wanted to acknowledge her service to our community.
Thank you, Rebecca, and we wish Alyssa Martin all the best. We appreciate her hard work for the county and wish her well in her new endeavors. And we thank everyone for their time, and thanks for the applicants and everyone for being here today. As you can see, these are really hard decisions, and it's never easy, but we try to balance this. So at 6:06, we are adjourned for this hearing. Thank you.